Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council meeting of the 16th of May 2023. Welcome members of the public gallery and welcome to council members and staff. I'd like to start by acknowledging that tonight we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past and present. Apologies. We do have apologies from our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Susan Gontaszewski, who was quite determined to be here with COVID, but is not well enough to attend online. So we wish Susan all the best. So that takes us to public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome to you all this evening. For those who may not have attended a council meeting before, we just ask that you come up to the microphone. There's no set order. If you could just state your name, the suburb in which you reside and the item that you are speaking to, and then we do time you to 3 minutes and we'll see a clock appear. So I'd like to welcome the first speaker forward, please.
Thank you, Dudley Meyer Highgate. So the first item is 13.1, the first hour free parking. The report that came to you last time showed or purported to show that 50,000 cars had disappeared over the year. The staff subsequently admitted that that was just the people who were staying less than an hour. If you looked at the statistics, you saw that it was 100,000 patrons, and that was over a 6-month period. So over a full year, you were losing 200,000 cars, not patrons. Yeah, cars could have 2 or 3 people in it. That's a significant number of people. What the council has to realise that it's an issue of marketing rather than just simple finance. The power of free, I think Councillor Yoplow mentioned it, has got a lot of power out there. It far more than just the $1 gold coin that they would pay. So council, you've done the trial, you've got the results. The results are exactly what the business people had predicted. It's time now to revert back to that first hour free and be a bit more creative in how you market that to people. Marketing is very important, and also be a bit more creative how you get the funds that you need. The second item is 11.5, the differential rating strategy. I think this is just a tick the box exercise that provides the minimum information that's required by the Act. I think what's the point of asking people if they're happy with a 4.5 increase if you don't tell them what you're going to spend it on? I suppose the assumption has to be it'll be the same old, same old. Prior to 2015 and 16, ratepayers were presented with a detailed budget when asked for comment. It was a document like this that went right down to details. You could see how much was spent on seniors programs. Capital was listed with reasons why the capital was being done. Over time, the amount of information provided has been reduced to a single rate setting page. I think the attitude before 2015-16 was, we've got nothing to hide. We'll open the books and we'll seek genuine comment. As to the purported community consultation that was referenced, I've spoken to 4 people who attended. They were very unhappy. They were bombarded with information, and when they were asking questions, they were quite often told, I'm sorry, there's not enough time, we have to move on to the next item. To somehow suggest that the evening was a surrogate for broader community feedback, as the report suggests, is a sham. It was a token replacement for genuine consultation. About the only thing to be learnt from the presentation is that some areas of receiving underground power will have their projects delayed for 3 years. I doubt if anyone had the guts to mention that on the night. It's only when you look at the details and do the comparisons that you realise 3 areas delayed for 2 years, 2 areas delayed for 14 months, 1 area delayed for 6 months. I said at the beginning, this is no more than a tick-the-box exercise. It doesn't come within cooey of what the city used to do to engage with the community 10 years ago. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Emma Cole and councillors. Leslie Flory, 79 Sass Ave, Mount Hawthorn. I have a major asset of the City of Vincent running under and through my property. It's a large stormwater pipe which has been neglected by the City of Vincent. In the GHD stormwater drainage report from the council meeting 13th of December 22, it says under risk management implications, rated high I quote, "There is a large amount of drainage infrastructure which runs through private property." I have 3 questions. How many properties have drainage infrastructure running through their property? I would like an approximate number. Is it over 10? Is it over 20? Is it over 30? Is it over 50? Is it over 80? Is it over 100 plus properties? I'd like a direct answer to my question. Question 2. How much does the City of Vincent pay in total premiums to the Local Government Insurance Scheme, LGIS, per annum? Question 3, I request the City of Vincent to place the stormwater drainage connection policy on hold until the City of Vincent locates and maps all the stormwater pipes and their condition, rectifies capacity issues, obstructions, and able to control the flow of stormwater. I put forward there be no developments allowed to connect into these stormwater pipes until all of the above issues are solved and rectified. It is irresponsible of the City of Vincent to allow developments to connect in when you don't know where the stormwater pipes are, let alone their size and condition. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Leslie. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mayor Cole. Good evening, councillors, and welcome back, Mayor Cole, to the bear pit of local government, for better or worse.
Thank you, Greg. I do enjoy local government.
I'm Greg Johnson. I have a business in Mount Hawthorn at 159 Scarborough Beach Road. It's a footwear business that's been in the City of Vincent for 70 years. So my question tonight refers to item 13.1, which is on the agenda, and this goes back for a period of well over 12 months. I just want to quickly take the council back to the history of this, and also to the gallery and to those in the press and those watching online. This commenced on the 30th of June in 2022 with a survey that was put out by the council. This is your own survey, not nobody else's. The survey was rejected. It was in the question that was asked was, should we have a 30-minute free parking position going from 1 hour to 30 minutes? The question was rejected by the community, overwhelmingly 85%. So that's what happened. Your survey rejected. Came to council, they looked at it, we move on. The next meeting we come to, and the timeline was the 30th of the 6th, the survey proved unpopular, and that led to a discussion. And then we got to the 5th of July with the council meeting, where the proposal was put, not for the first 30 minutes being free, down from an hour, but to the intervention of the CEO, who suggested to the council a good idea would be to charge $1 fee for the first hour. The council picked it up and ran with it. It wasn't on the original agenda, but they picked it up and ran with it. It's now known as the McCallum model for parking. That's what it's known as. That's what it's dubbed. It then got passed. 3 people spoke against it, being Councillor Alexander, being Councillor Warner, being Councillor Iopolo. The other councillors didn't say much about it, but they voted that it go ahead. It went ahead, and it went ahead for 6 months. And I just want to make this point. When it went ahead and the proposal was moved and seconded and it was passed, at the end of that program, many people here in the gallery, small business, spoke against it. The survey spoke against it, and these experienced people spoke against it. These people know what they're talking about. They know they're in business, they're successful. Anyway, be that as it may, at the end of that night, Mayor Cole said to us, look, this is a trial for 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, if it proves unsuccessful, we can go back to the original 1 hour free. That was the commitment made here, and there was a commitment made the next day to the press. So I take Mayor Cole on your word. Where have we arrived at now? Well, we've then got a report back on from the council. We've had 2 reports. We had the preliminary briefing report, which was discussed, and then we had the next report. And at the last report on the 4th of the 4th, council here were confused. Everyone acknowledged that there wasn't sufficient information. The information was not correct, and they didn't really know what to do. There was clear confusion. Notwithstanding that, the vote was held, and what happened? By a majority, it was pushed through. Here we are tonight, finally tonight, at the end of over a long 12-month period, and a lot of cost to this council in time and human resources, when they should be focusing on core business. It's proved unpopular, the model's unsuccessful, we know all those sorts of things. What are we going to do about it? Let's go back to what we had. Tonight, we've got a proposal at 13.1 put by Councillor Alexander. And hopefully tonight, this will be the resolution of the matter. We will return because the model has clearly not worked. It's clearly not worked. Question I want to ask tonight is 2 questions. One of the councillors individually. You've got to face the ratepayers.
Sorry, you've reached your 3 minutes. So can you?
Well, the final question I'd like to put then is this, which goes to the nub of the question. Mayor and councillors collectively, you promised us it was a trial. You promised us if it didn't work, it would go back. Will you keep the promise with us, the small business community, and with the ratepayers and the general community? That's
Thanks,
what we're
Greg.
looking for.
And I'll come to that because can you please conclude now?
Yes, okay, I've concluded. Thank you.
Thank you. On this side, on this proposal, the idea was that it would come back to the April council meeting, which it did last April, with the data, and it was always to inform the setting of fees and charges in the 23-24 budget year. That was always the intent. So the 6-month trial, I'm not sure, but the resolution, which I don't have in front of me right now and I can find, was to get the data back in April to inform budget setting, which we'll be doing next month on the 20th of June. So that was the intent. But thank you, Greg. If you
That
could-
was the intent.
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure that's the intent that came across.
Okay, well, that should be part of the decision and the resolution of council, which I'll happily pull out. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, Linda Harris, Brentham Street, Leederville. 2 months ago, a petition was given to the council regarding the safety of people walking in Britannia Reserve on the bitumen paths. In 3 days, the petition obtained 110 signatures from concerned residents. It reads as follows. We are concerned about the safety of pedestrians walking on the bitumen paths within Britannia Reserve. This is becoming quite dangerous because of the increasing numbers of speeding cyclists, e-scooters and skateboards. The pedestrians using this park include the elderly, people on mobility scooters and wheelchairs, parents with prams and small children learning to walk, and dog walkers, often with elderly dogs. Many in this group cannot hear the speeding vehicle or move quickly to get out of the way. Some are becoming too frightened to walk in the reserve. We do not have a problem with young children learning to ride as they travel slowly. We concluded, we respectfully request that large signs be erected at all entrances to the park, stating pedestrians only. Now remember, 110 people signed this petition. Since this petition, the council advised that they are reviewing the safety of this area, and the comment was they are considering widening the path. This, quite frankly, is ridiculous, as it will only encourage e-scooters and cyclists to ride faster. And I now observe that in the proposal to calm the traffic in Britannia Road, which is a great idea, we certainly support that, but the council is proposing to have a bike lane 1.2 metres wide feed into the reserve. And if you're interested, there's a copy of what they're proposing. This really would just add to more people, more cyclists using the park. I'm deeply concerned that this council has apparently ignored the concerns of 110 ratepayers who signed the petition and who regularly use Britannia Reserve. Other parks have clear signage of designated areas for pedestrian only. Britannia Reserve has always been for pedestrians only, except for children under 12. Let me just tell you of some of the people who use this park. At 3 p.m, you find 3 or 4 elderly ladies walking along the park, just near their residential care facility. They can't get out of the way. 2 elderly men wheel their elderly, very disabled, presumably wives, in wheelchairs, prams, toddlers, older people, and often older dogs. Why is this council finding it so difficult to put up clear signs to the effect of pedestrians only? One dog has already had a broken leg with an encounter from a cyclist. I sincerely hope the next victim is not a young child. What we are requesting is not expensive. It is easy to do and could save a life. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Also, just to add, I think you've pointed out the bike plan, which is item number item 10.5, and that does have in there a proposal to have a cycle lane on that side of Britannia, and that will be going up for public advertising. So it's open for will be open for comment. Will be going up for community consultation, And that's something you might like to discuss with people that you know at Britannia Reserve if they'd like to respond to that. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. Apologies, I don't have an agenda number. Aldo Arco is my name. I own the property at Unit 12, 160 Scarborough Beach Road in Mount Hawthorn. It's part of the St Elmo building.
Oh, yes, yours is petition.
I do have a
number 1.
petition, yes.
Yeah, 5.1. Yeah.
5.1, is it, ma'am?
Yeah,
Thank you
go
very much.
ahead.
Just like to start that I purchased a building in February 21. And in March 21, the first rain of the year, ended up having a leak, a water leak in the bottom stairs bedroom. So the strata organised the local maintenance, Bob Baker from Northern Suburbs Plumbing, to attend, and he cleaned out the guttering system and crossed our fingers that that was going to be the issue. The next rain, the roof was still leaking and had caused damage to the actual ceiling itself, and mould had started to grow. Once the rain stopped, we got the ceiling repaired and repainted, and I had the mould cleaned by a professional. The next rain, the gutters again were full of leaves and blocking the water flow. Even with the gutters having the grates over the top did not help the issue. Further expenses were made to my ceiling and to cleaning the mould. I actually had to cut a hole in the ceiling so the plumber could go up and have a look to see what the issue was. Extra damage to my property. We sent off emails in October 21 on the 28th to the City of Vincent expressing our concerns. And in May 22, we got a reply. They said that they'd been out there, the contractors had attended twice, because the first time that they'd gone out there on our behalf, they cut down the wrong tree. There were 2 trees on Flinders Street side. The City of Vincent cut down and removed the wrong tree. The tree that was causing the problem was still in existence. I understand that there's a policy, a tree policy in place, but I do also believe that where there's a policy, there's an exception. The trees were pruned back, spliced down from the top about 3 or 4 meters down to avoid the leaves from flying over onto the tree, but this doesn't help the problem because when the wind comes, the other side of the tree, the leaves leave and go into the guttering system. This correspondence went back and forth for a couple of years and nothing was done. Today's the 16th of May 23 and I stand here before you. We've spent $7,000 to try and reroute the water, direct the water, and it hasn't helped. We've put in bigger guttering systems, piping downpipe system, and it hasn't helped. And I'm now running out of time and I have so much to say. But I'll leave this with you, the City of Vincent. If the water continues to soak the ceiling and the ceiling falls and injures the tenants, will you be liable? If the water causes electrocution, somebody gets electrocuted, will you be liable?
Just ask your final questions, please.
I ask that the City of Vincent look at my issue with some empathy and some logic reasoning. It's causing me distress every time it rains. I get anxiety as what's happening to my unit. 2 people live in that apartment during winter. Only one of them sleep on the bed because the other side of the bed has a bucket.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you for
you,
your time.
Aldo. Appreciate your comments and for coming down, and we will deal with your petition shortly. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, councillors. My name's Sue Golden and I'm from 30 Chapman Street. We have a petition, I think it's number 5.3. It just pertains to our street and the parking arrangements.
5.2, but that was very
5.2.
close. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to add a few things. I know it's just pertaining to our street. So, the current parking situation is full-time parking on one side and 2-hour parking on the other side. And the Transperth building staff just use us as their long-term or all-day parking most of the time. The parking arrangement's been in for a really long time, and since then, obviously, the houses have been made into duplexes, and then our share houses where they were one-person occupants, etc. So the houses increased in density. The blocks increased in density in general. It's just one block between Lord Street and West Parade. A lot of the houses are 1930s, 1950s, no driveways. Small garages with basically space for storage, and that's about it. The street on the other side of us has about 12 occupants in the whole street, and that has 2 hours on both sides. Ours has about 46 occupants, and about 2 of them are not of driving age at the moment. So there's a lot of cars trying to park on that street, plus a tow truck business that's apparently allowed to operate on the street as well. So we're just asking that it be looked at to change to 2 hours on both sides, just so we can use the parking in our street. And the signalling tower that's coming in soon is also taking up parking. Obviously that's not happening yet, but we're just trying to preempt the problem. before
Yes,
it
well, we actually
gets
have an
worse.
update for you, Sue, because we had intended to put 2P in on this street under some changes that the city's making under our accessible city strategy, which is area wide. So CEO, I think, has an update for you on that.
Oh, cool. Okay, thank you.
Through Mayor Cole, yes. So we are shortly due to install those 2P restrictions, and that's part of a whole of City of Vincent rollout of parking restrictions. So Chapman Street, the northern side, will have 2P, given that it branches off Lord Street as a major thoroughfare. We will advise the date when the contractor is due to put those signs in, but it'll be over the next few weeks. We're proposing that it'll be 2P between 8 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Monday to Friday. And that's matching what's on the southern side of your street. So that'll happen shortly.
Pleasure. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name's Sean Offer. I'm from Fresh Provisions in Mount Lawley. I'd like to speak on item 13.1. I'd like to thank Councillor Alexander for bringing this motion. I just want to reiterate the email I sent through today. I know you had some 1,500 pages to read for this meeting, so it was quite the preparation. So thank you for your efforts getting through that. Just to reiterate the points I made. This issue with the parking, it is having an effect on our business. Last time I was here, I discussed that we were losing over 300 customers a week out of this dollar parking issue. Well, compared to the same period previously, now we're losing close to 400. So we're losing more and more customers as time goes on. We're still getting a lot of feedback from customers. I made a story about that in my email today. One of the customers saying it's not just the fact that they've got to pay $1 for parking, it's the inconvenience of having to go to the meter at all compared to other businesses. The financial benefits that the council is going to benefit from this are short term. It's what we do today that incubates the success for the future, and we need to make sure this area survives. Last time I was here, I spoke about what the City of Perth was doing as far as its parking goes. I did note over the weekend how strongly the City of Subiaco was advertising for its retail precincts. It used to rely on paid parking all the way through. They were one of the first councils in Perth to introduce paid parking. That paid parking is now gone, with free parking after 5 p.m. in the evenings every day of the week, free parking on the weekends, and 1 hour free parking during the week. They've not only lost the fee that they gained from this parking, they've lost out on the retail commercial value of their properties. Now they're having to provide significant support to the restaurants and businesses in that area with extensive marketing campaigns and websites and online support to support these businesses. We don't have to wait for consultants to come through to provide us more reports. They will tell you what I know is that free parking is what gets people in. We've ignored the first lot of consultation that the council undertook. I'm currently paying for your next survey, and I can tell you now, the answer is still the same. People want free parking. So I would encourage you all to support this motion, and thank you to Councillor Alexander for bringing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, hi, Gerard O'Brien, talking on 13.1. I'm the owner of the Raglan Road car park in Alexander Buildings there. I still think it's really concerning that we raised this a few months ago, that I own a large portion of this car park, and we've got an agreement between yourselves and myself which says that you cannot charge for this parking, cannot charge without my permission. And it's still been going on and on and on. So I think it needs to be addressed. And whilst I've now met with the representative council, I just think this is pretty urgent. And I'll only give my permission if there is the 1 hour free. I secondly can't see any benefit to council in this, because as you destroy the businesses by charging for parking, your GRV falls, your rates therefore have to increase in the cents in the dollar and punish all your residents to achieve it. And I even actually spoke recently with Emma Coles on the property council, and she spoke passionately about town centres, which I thought was fantastic. And she actually understood retail. and this is the exact opposite. It's a prickle factor. No one wants to pay for parking. They don't have to pay it elsewhere in other municipalities. Why would they want to pay it here? And if people are being punished for going to our shops in our municipality, they will go somewhere else. There's plenty of other places to go and park without that prickle factor. They don't mind if they pay a little bit more for their shopping, but they don't want to get out of their car and buy it. Strong retail is the heart of community, and you are here for community. It's the diverse, strong, balanced retail that makes community. It gives people somewhere to go, somewhere to enjoy, and brings us together as a community. And we are destroying it. I just really ask you, please, to drop the first 1 hour free and get on with it and allow people that are genuine shoppers to be able to come and go as they do in every other most shopping centres throughout the state and buy their goods. Thank you.
The 21 days advertising. 21 days. Look, just I know this is very topical, the notice of motion, and because we can't do it the notice of motion straight away, we have to deal with general business first. So some of you may not be here at the end. There's just two things I do wish to mention. First of all, the council can't make a decision to end it tonight. We would have to do a 21-day public advertising period because it is the fees being set in the fees and charges for this budget year. So in any case, we wouldn't be able to deal with that until the following council meeting where we will be dealing with the budget for the following. Dudley, please be respectful. And also just to mention that in our differential rating strategy for adoption tonight, we've reduced the revenue against first hour $1 from $800,000 to $400,000. So we're already indicating that we are going to halve the revenue from that through the advertised rate setting. So I just wanted to draw those two things to your attention. Thank you, Dudley. Sorry, it's not a question and answer session, but it is very nice to see you again, Jared. So I didn't automatically recognise you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Michael Hernan. I'm from Perth, speaking on agenda item 9.2. I've worked at Evolution Bikes located at 334 to 336 Beaufort Street for the past 4 years. Not only do I work in this particular building, but I virtually live there as well, residing at Luxton Apartments directly behind it. Needless to say, I'm quite fond of the area, the immediate area, and have a vested interest in its prosperity, not just from a business perspective. Considering the goals of the built form policy that governs that particular area, with regard to the activity and interactivity particularly, I can only conclude that the recent assessment of the building has been made in a negatively subjective manner. This is understandable, if not a bit disappointing. Our vision for the building was based on an extensive deliberation and consultation with designers, our customers and local residents, which has resulted in some very successful outcomes for the area particularly. The building provides an active and interactive internal and external environment, which has helped us build a customer base in the last 4 years in excess of 18,000 people, stretching from Busselton to Joondalup. Inadvertently, people travel quite some distance to get to our store and frequently visit the surrounding businesses while they're there. With that in mind, if there was indeed a better way for us to be more active and interactive while still maintaining the security obligations that we have to the West Australian Police Force and our customers' assets, which are secured within our store, we would definitely have done that without hesitation. As far as the subjective assessment of our impact on the streetscape is concerned with regard to the fitting of roller shutters outside of business hours, if our business which happens to be located between a car park on one side, a petrol station on the other side, across from a park, if that were to match the streetscape of the surrounding area as it's been requested, we would have to go quite a fair way backwards in an aesthetic sense, to the point where we would be deviating even further from the built form policy. Currently, our building complies with the built form policy during business hours, 7 days a week, which we intend to stay open for the foreseeable future. Outside of those times, the level of visible security, or visual security, I should say, lost by having roller shutters on the windows is completely negated by the security that they provide themselves. Bearing in mind that the only direct line of sight to those particular windows is 100 metres away through a park. Final point, try to keep it as brief as I can. Although the council has had to deal with 2 subjectively negative reviews of our building presentation in previous consultation, I would request that the council also takes into account the 8 positive reviews that they also received, and maybe even the passive reviews of the other 38,000 residents of the City of Vincent who seem to believe that it's perfectly acceptable. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Very well timed. Next speaker, please.
Carol Scaife, 15 Moore Street, Perth. Agenda item 9.3, the proposed alterations to 12 Brookman Street. Good evening, City of Vincent Mayor and councillors. I wish to acknowledge and thank the council for its recommendation to refuse the DA at 12 Brookman Street. I am aware an argument will be made that the recommendation should be overturned, and this is very concerning. As everyone is well aware, I do not support 2-storey development within the Moir Brookman Heritage Precinct, as it isn't in keeping with the modest single-storey working class dwellings that make this precinct unique. Whilst the public may only be concerned with the street facades, as owners who fought to keep the precinct intact and appreciate the open space and lower density single level accommodation it provides, we are the ones who will suffer the detrimental effects of 2-storey extensions. I'm also quite concerned about the upcoming review of the Moir Street, Brookman Street Heritage Guidelines. With this current proposal for 12 Brookman Street, one of the heritage aspects that is being demolished is the rear water closet, which is a must retain under the heritage guidelines as they currently stand. In addition to the negative heritage aspects of the application, the proposal exceeds the R25 code requirements for bulk, having a detrimental overshadowing effect on the adjoining neighbour to the south, plus the new footprint substantially reduces the required open space. These 2 points alone should be an automatic rejection as per the council recommendation and do not warrant any discussion about overturning the decision. The orientation of our houses makes us particularly vulnerable to overshadowing, and the overshadowing is substantial in this case, as the neighbouring house is already at a disadvantage with no northerly aspect. It is highly concerning for us. If this gets approved, it does set a precedent for overdevelopment within the precinct. At risk is its unique built form, and it will become indistinguishable from any other inner city street with multi-level rear extensions. It will no longer represent the modest single-storey houses whose working class heritage value has been recognised at local, state and international levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening all. My name is Anthony Hart. I live in the suburb of Perth and I am the applicant in relation to agenda item 9.2. I'd just like to start by thanking the wider community for all their support, the level of which has been humbling. I'd also just quickly like to point out a few key reasons I believe our development application should get approval. The glazing in question represents only 5% of our total shop front. It's very important to keep in perspective, 5%. Fitting security measures internally does not protect the glazing, creating a potential public safety issue when the windows are broken. Guess when? Not if. We have minimum requirements on security due to our contract with WA Police, and this also obligates us in terms of minimising or completely removing the harm to people. Roller shutters are the only thing that can achieve this. Our front doors are neither securable or weatherproof. These were installed at council request with full knowledge of the roller door that was in place at the time and that had been there for 10 plus years. The effectiveness of the fixed roller shutters is also empirically proven. We had 5 break-ins in the 3+ years prior to their installation, 0 in the almost 2 years since. There's a few more key points, but I sent them all through on the statement. I'd really like to think over the past 12 months, I've tried to engage constructively with the council in order to get this issue resolved. I provided clear feedback on many of the issues the council have raised, and I believe I've addressed their concerns in a considered and reasonable manner. An example of which is in relation to metal grills, an alternative security measure proposed previously by council and mentioned on a few occasions in the briefing meeting. I feel these are absolutely unsightly and make the shop fronts that fit them look like bear cages. Case in point is Yossie's gun shop, images of which I supplied. This is also an opinion shared by many people in the community, as reflected in both the community consultation and the significant feedback we have received via social media and numerous other channels. Are we heading down a path of shop fronts ubiquitously filled with metal gridwork because it's not simply because it's allowable? I sincerely hope not. I have come to understand there is a mandate to not allow fixed roller shutters in the city of Vincent, and this is relatively common knowledge, although I was blissfully unaware. And given I had a roller shutter in place at my premises, which the council was aware of, I'd say my ignorance is somewhat forgivable. The mandate takes no consideration of location, no consideration of building context, no negotiation, despite other councils allowing fixed roller shutters within spitting distance of the city of Vincent Town Centre, Matusik Jewellers. To repeat the above, I'd like to think I've addressed the many points council have raised politely, constructively, reasonably, objectively, and yes, in some cases subjectively, but with clear explanations and justifications supporting that. But I can't address a mandate. Really, my sincere hope is that some discretion will be sensibly applied. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, and thanks for the opportunity to visit your store today.
You're welcome.
Next speaker, please. Any further speakers?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Leon Furios from North Perth. I'm here on behalf of the Save North Perth Streets Action Group, which I'm sure you're sick of me saying each meeting. Hopefully this is the last time I have to say that. I'm here to say the group supports and commends the administration's recommendation to discontinue the trial of the diagonal diversion on Leek Street in Alma. This is item 10.1 of the agenda. Now, I should say the trial has been very useful in providing data and information about the consequences of a diagonal diversion installation on Leek Street. It's a good thing that we've done it. But that trial has revealed serious safety issues that were just not anticipated when the decision was taken by the council to proceed with the trial. Now, these issues are concentrated not only at the site of the diversion itself, but they spill into the surrounding streets, into the laneways, and even into Charles Street itself. Alongside these safety issues, we've seen widespread community opposition to the diagonal diversion. It's got no serious support among the large majority of the constituents. And so in our submission, the conclusion is rather clear. The trial should be discontinued as soon as possible. I've got one last observation to make, and this is really a reaction to a comment made by Councillor Iopolo at the briefing session last week. And the councillor asked whether the council would be reversing itself by ending the trial early tonight. Now, in fairness to the council, that is not the decision before you this evening. You've conducted a trial, you've received new information, you've got new data about the diversion. You're now called upon to make a totally new decision based on the new information that you have before you. It's a new decision. It's a different decision. It's not a reversal. So there's no shame in making the right call based on the information before you this evening. And so on that note, the Save North Perth Streets Action Group, we should have got a punchier name, urges the council to vote to end the diversion this evening. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Leon. Are there further speakers?
Paul Georgeson, I'd just like to talk about 9.2 in support of Anthony's position. I lived in 250 Beaufort Street for 3 years. You got to understand the location to understand the people and what happens around that area. You know, there's Weld Square. My children were asked to cross the road rather than walk down Weld Square, walk past Weld Square, walk through Weld Square. And it's only 200 or 300 meters down the road. There's hostels, there's homeless hostels, you know, there's a variety of things like Mick mentioned. Across the road, there's a funeral parlor, there's a petrol station around the corner, there's an empty car park, and there's Bard Square there. The reason it has been broken into is because of its location. You can't not consider that when you make your decision. Now, having a roller door there existing and then putting up some windows makes perfect sense. You've got loads of hundreds of thousands of dollars of bikes on that floor. You have to think about this. You can't penalize the guy as a small business for protecting what he is paying for and out of his own money. You got to understand that, and I'm sure you do. 250 has glass sliding doors. Someone left a wallet there one night, good intentions, behind the glass sliding doors. Someone took a road sign, prized open the doors to get the wallet. They didn't take the wallet, they took the money that was in the wallet. That's the kind of area it is. So you have to consider that when you think about passing your decision tonight. And, as he said, I've got a minute left. So, security wise, people break glass. I've seen them getting called out, dragging the children there. It's a safety concern. Why take that risk? There's some aesthetics. It's not a utopian part of the world. There's some rough characters there. You got to understand that. And, the reason people can get away with breaking it is because there's no one around there. There's no one there standing looking in the windows, and people standing there looking in the windows, and people are stealing bikes. So something to ponder. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate you bringing that perspective forward as a local resident. Are there any other last speakers this evening?
How you doing, Mayor, councillors? I'm not on the list for stuff, but I just wanted to make things towards last week. I went to go use the servo toilet on Beaufort and Buller.
Would you mind just giving us your name and the suburb that you live in?
Steve, and I live in Highgate.
Are you happy to give us your last name, or would you
Oh,
prefer
yes,
not to?
Steve Beaumont. Yeah, I
Thank
live in
you.
Highgate.
Thank you.
And the problem I had is the servos toilet was closed by vandalism. The Woolworths shopping centres decided, because of unruly behaviour, to close their doors at 5 o'clock. I was just lucky I live around the corner, so I was able to make it home. But then I later found out that you've bulldozed the toilets in the park, and there's no public toilets along Beaufort, Woolworth Street. And the thing is every Friday when you have the footy match on, everybody's pissing up the laneways and all that sort of stuff. So one of my recommendations would be for HPF Stadium on the game night was to put 2 portable toilets at the servo, so the patrons can use the toilets when they're walking to and fro the precinct, and just have a think about like the homeless people around the area, and like the people said about the roller shutters. I'm actually for the people with the roller shutters, because that area is high in crime. We've got people wrecking the toilets. Stuff needs to be done. We need to wake up the rangers and work out what they're doing of a night time. The seems like the police get let into the servos to go to the toilet, but us usual folks that pay the rents and rates around here, we don't get nothing. So I just wanted to bring that to attention and maybe get it looked at over the next coming few weeks.
So Steve, just to check in with you, are you saying the servo in the corner of Beaufort and Bulwer?
Yeah, close the toilets.
Okay. So we are now looking at having a toilet at Birdwood Square, and we're looking at whether we're working with Highgate Primary School to see whether that's actually something a bit more substantial than what the city might ordinarily put there, so that the school can make better use of Birdwood. So actually in the process of looking at toilet for Birdwood Square, which
but it's the patronage of the servo and the Woolworths. It should be that if they can't supply a toilet, they should have to close their doors, and it should be that across the whole board. I've spoken to CMFMU with the work sites. They're having a hard time with toilets in the area.
Yep.
So it's a common problem all the way up through, and it shouldn't be a few homeless people wrecking the joint that's stopping us from going to use the toilets.
Okay, well, that's another thing that we can look into, is what the planning approval said for the Woolworths about public toilets and the servo. We can potentially see what the planning approval said, whether they're required to provide toilets open to the public and when. So I can look into that as well.
Yeah, but I've been here 13 months from Rockingham, and it's a good suburb, but it just needs to lift its game with the people in the office, and when there's stuff brought up, it needs to just get a bit more quicker action.
Okay, thanks
Thank
for
you.
your feedback, Steve. Are there any other speakers this evening?
Hi, my name's Peter Giles. I live in Perth on Palmerston Street, just in support of item 9.2. So I'm a patron of the store. And yeah, I've never done this before, so excuse me if I'm a bit rambly. They're just, generally quite good people. I used to work in hospitality, used to work at Leederville Hotel, and just as a bit of a story, when they did the renovations, the builders put in some fairly insubstantial toilet doors, and they said, yep, that'll be fine. And I said, no, people are going to literally hang off those doors. And they did, and they changed it. And that's the kind of thing that we're dealing with here in terms of glass, particularly broken glass and things like that. People coming out of pubs, they get a bit fussy, get a bit drunk, and they do silly things. And they're right just up the road from the Brisbane Hotel. So I'm certainly in I wouldn't like to see them lose the roller shutters just because, the cost of the business, but also just the broken glass. Like, how long will it take to get that fixed, and what kind of danger will there be for people? In terms of the guys themselves, just wanted to tell a bit of a story about the quality of the people there. So I'm not a rich person. I take my bike in there every once in a while to get serviced. I brought in and asked a question about my tires, and one of the guys noticed, oh, you've got a couple of spokes gone. You should get that fixed. It's not particularly safe. And I said, look, sorry, I can't afford it. When I come in next time, I'll do it. And I said, don't worry, we'll do it for you now. And they changed the spokes out for me for free. So they're good people. And I think that what they're asking for is pretty reasonable within the tenants of the area. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have the glass windows there, have the bikes visible, and then people steal them. As one of the other speakers said, out of sight, out of mind, in terms of, people see it, they try and break in and steal it. So, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ben. You did very well for your first go. We'll hope to see you back again. Anyone else wish to speak this evening?
Good evening all. My name is Jamal. I live in 131 Harold Street, Highgate. Just speaking on item 9.2, is it? I've spent quite a bit of money at the local
Jamal,
bike shop.
are you happy to share your second name?
Oh, sorry, Jamal Benvote.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
it's my first time. I spent quite a bit of money at the bike shop. My bike probably goes in there every 3 or 4 months for a service, especially in the wet weather. So I'd like to think my belongings will be quite safe when it's in the bike shop. So, and I'm a local resident and just on Harold Street, and it's starting to get a lot of people filtering down from the McDonald's. There's a bit of trouble going on. So, feel safe with the roller shutters being there, considering with my bikes in the workshop, sorry. So I personally keep my bikes in my apartment, so that I live on level 2, so they're safe and locked away. So thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Jamal. Appreciate you coming in. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate you coming to tell us your thoughts and share your questions with us. That's all been noted, and for those who've asked questions, we will try to raise those as the items come up. I will now just note that we do have some public statements and questions that we have received in writing, and that they have been distributed to council members as well today. They were accepted by 3 p.m. and then I think we did have a late entry at just after 4 p.m. as well. So they've been distributed to council members. I'll now just go to item 4, which is applications for leave of absence. Council members, are there any applications for leave? Councillor Loden, did you have one? Yes.
Yes, just from, sorry, I don't have a specific date. Let me just pull up the specific date.
Is it the 20th,
the
20 and 21st of May?
Yeah, the 21st to the 24th of May, which is this Sunday through to Wednesday.
So the 21st to the 24th of May. Can I please have a mover and seconder to endorse the leave? Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Any other requests for leave? Okay. I'll then move to item 5, the receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. We have 2 petitions this evening, and both have been spoken to this evening. The first petition with 8 signatures is from Aldo Arco of Chort Hill, requesting that council carry out crown pruning to a height below the height of the building and shaping of the street trees adjacent to the building at 152 to 160 Scarborough Beach Road in the Mount Hawthorn Town Centre, in order to prevent ongoing roof and ceiling damage to the apartments and the associated costs incurred to repair the damage being caused by the flooding from leaf and nut drop into the gutters. So understand there's been a lot of discussion with the parks team at the City of Vincent, and I have had an email from the parks manager informing that the parks team don't support this type of pruning to these trees. So therefore it's been referred to council for our determination. So in terms of receiving the petition, I'd recommend on this one that council receive the petition and a report be prepared. That could either be an individual report or as part of the information bulletin. Leave that up to administration to determine what's most appropriate. So if council members are happy with that response, could I please have a mover and seconder? Move Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Castle, that we receive the petition and receive a report. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you. In relation to 5.2, that is the petition with 23 signatures received requesting a change on the parking regulations on Chapman Street in Perth to restrict the other side of the street that's not already to 2p 2-hour parking limit. Sue Golden spoke to that this evening, and as you heard from the CEO, under the changes that are happening under the Accessible City Strategy, those parking restrictions are due to be put in place, and a date for the contractor will be provided to Sue so that she can inform her neighbours. So in relation to this one, my recommendation would be that, given that action is already happening in response, that we receive the petition. Any other perspectives on something different? Okay, I'll put that then, that we receive the petition of in item 5.2. All those can have a mover and seconder. Move Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Okay, so next we have confirmation of minutes. This was for the meeting of the 4th of April 2023. Can I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Loden. All those in favour? Thank you. The minutes are adopted. Announcements by the presiding member. Look, I haven't decided to do many announcements this evening because we have a very full agenda ahead of us, but I did just want to briefly mention the Pickle District After Dark event, which happened last Friday. And it sort of reflects upon some of the discussions that we've been having on one of the items here tonight, which is the Pickle District planning framework and the desire for that to be an arts precinct. So another incredible event hosted by the Pickle District Town team. They've also managed to turn the road reserve owned by Main Roads Western Australia by the Graham Farmer Freeway into a pickle park with an RAC grant, which was in full force and effect on the Friday night of the event, with lots of people using that as a new public space. So I just wanted to say congratulations to the Pickle District Town team on another very successful event in the Pickle District. So moving now to declarations of interest, and I will go to the CEO.
Chair Mayor Cole, the declarations are as per the briefing session last week, including from Councillor Opolo an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.6, which is the Leederville Oval Precinct Master Plan, noting that Councillor Opolo's daughter attends Leederville Early Childhood Centre. Councillor Loden declared a similar impartiality interest on that item, noting that Councillor Loden's son also attends Leederville Early Childhood Centre. Councillor Castle declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.1, Primrose Street, Perth, proposed alterations and additions to group dwelling, noting that Councillor Castle is friends with one of the architects employed by Chindarsi Associates, who prepared some of the papers for the report. Mayor Cole declared an impartiality interest in relation to item 9.4, which relates to the request for proposals for redevelopment of Leederville car parks, noting that Councillor Cole's interest is that one of the sub-consultants to one of the proposals is someone Mayor Cole knows professionally and personally, but has not discussed or engaged with this consultant or any of the proponents in relation to the item. And that's all, Mayor Cole.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any other declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. So, councillors, just in relation to the items that have already been raised by members in the public gallery in the order in which we'll be dealing with them this evening, those items are 11.5, 10.5, 9.2, 9.3 and 10.1. CEO, I don't think I've got the absolute majority notated on my agenda, but just in relation to any absolute majority decisions, we've already had differential rating strategy pulled forward. Is there any others? Yeah, so the nom will ordinarily be pulled out and have to go after business, after general business, and sorry, the other item.
Through Mayor Cole, the absolute majority decisions relate to the outcome of advertising for the strategic community plan 22 to 32 and the annual review of council delegations, item 12.1.
The strategic community plan.
Yeah.
911.
911 and 12.1
12.1.
and 13.1.
Okay, so councillors, in addition to those items, are there any other items that you wish to call out for debate? Councillor Hallett, Councillor Castle.
12.2, thanks, Mayor Cole.
12.2. 12.2. Councillor Uplow.
Apologies, Mayor, if I repeat something that was already read out, so you were too quick for me to note them. I've got 9.1, 9.2, 9.4, 9.5, 9.9, 9.13, 9.14, 10.1. That's it, thanks.
Councillor Warner, Councillor Loden, Councillor Alexander. I'm just going to check that the items that have got amendments against them have been called out. (9.8) is one that I will call out.
To you, Mayor Cole, I'll now list the items that are being proposed to be moved en bloc, which include items 9.6, the Leederville Oval Precinct Master Plan, item 9.7, advertising of a new policy for North Claysbrook, 9.10, Thriving Places Strategy, 9.12, Amendment number 12 to Local Planning Scheme number 2, 10.2, Residential Parking Restrictions, Howard Street, 10.3, Graffiti Policy, 10.4, Tender Outcome, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, and 11.4, and items 12.3 and 12.4. Usually, Mayor, the deputy chair of the audit committee usually moves the minutes, so we might pull that one out as well, which is item 12.4.
All right, can I have a mover and seconder for the en bloc items, please? Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Loden. All those in favour? I declare the en bloc items carried. Okay, so the first item that was raised in the public gallery this evening is 11.5, which is the differential rating strategy for 2023-24. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Maybe just to provide some feedback to Mr. Meyer around transparency, fully acknowledge that we don't have the same level of detail included in our budget process that you would have seen 4 or 5 years ago. That was really very much the intent of the community panel. I guess one of the challenges with the budget is unless you've got experience in going through detailed financial reports and stuff like that, it is a little bit hard to discern the specifics out of what is going on in that budget. And so our intent specifically with the community panel is to go into a deep dive with a cross section of the community So rather than having a broad across the whole community and the few people who have, I guess, a detailed understanding of financial systems and services, having the opportunity to feedback, we want to make sure we get a cross section of people. And so that's what we did with the community panel and really hit on the big topics and issues that we see coming out of this budget. So what are the key themes and issues that we're dealing with, rather than dealing with maybe some of the more nuts and bolts type issues that you might see if you had the individual line items listed in the budget. Now, that might not have been seen as successful from some members of the panel, but the feedback we got from the consultant, which was of a cross section of the community, was that it was well received. We got a diverse amount of reviews from people on that as well. Some people wanted higher rates, other people wanted lower rates. Some people wanted to do more stuff. Some people wanted us to do less stuff. Broadly, my take on this was most people were in the middle, and we're broadly hitting about the middle, but doing probably a pretty good job of at least pissing most people off a little bit, which is probably just the curse of local government. But hopefully we're threading that needle to be somewhere in the middle there of what is meeting the expectations of the overall community. On the topic of the budget, it's a no frills budget. I guess last year we did a 7.8% rate rise. This year we're scheduled for a 4.5% rate rise. So, and then next year we're scheduled for another 4.5% rate rise in our long-term financial plan before we return to a 3 to 3.5% rate for the rest of that term. This is really about us catching up to where we needed to be. We've kind of systemically been over-promising and underrating for a very long period of time. We've been doing too much of kicking the can down the road on our asset maintenance and meeting our obligations to our community. And this is really about catching up. So it's not a popular budget. There's not a whole heap of bright and shiny things in here that you can say this is amazing stuff that the cities are doing. This is really about getting to where we need to be. We ate half of the cake last time. This is proposing to basically eat the next quarter of the cake, and then we've still got a quarter of the cake left that we have to get through next year as well. And then once we get to that point, we are more in a position where we can actually look to what are these new things that we want to do across the city. What are the other than just maintaining our roads, maintaining our buildings, and delivering on the programs that we've already committed to our community. If we want to do new stuff, we need to rate more to be able to fund those programs. So overall, I'm supportive of the recommendation. I think they've done a really good job on this. One final comment I did want to make is that we have had in the past discussions about surpluses, and this has sort of been part of the discussion ongoing as well for the city in this process. We have a surplus of just over 2% in this budget, and I guess the perspective I take on that, if it does come up in the debate, is that our budget is an estimate and it's intentionally a conservative estimate. We're local government. We're not we like to be innovative and try to be innovative, but we ultimately need to make sure that we have the money to pay our staff and to deliver on the programs that we're going to deliver on. We can't always be certain that we will deliver on all the programs that we say we're going to do. But the hard part is that in our capital works budget, as we progress through that work, we don't know which of the programs that are going to get delayed. And so it's kind of hard to say, oh, well, if we just knock that one program out, then we don't need to worry because that's probably going to be deferred. You are doing your best estimate because it is an estimate. It's a budget. If it was not an estimate, it'd be an actual, which is what we do in 18 months time or 15 months time from now, to say exactly what we did spend. And the fact that we are only 2% out is pretty good in my view. I've worked in large corporate organizations for most of my professional career, and I don't think I've ever had a budget that's delivered within 2% of what we said we were going to do when we first started. You look at some of the major projects out there, they have huge blowouts in their costs. So I actually think that our administrative staff have done a really good job of managing that budget, dealing with through all the various changes that we have that occur over the year, the things that we can't necessarily deal with, the changes in the external environment. And then where those changes are need to make in those budgets, bringing it back to council through our very structured process that says that they can't just change things on the fly. They need to come back to us if there's big major changes they want to make to the budgeting process. So that's all I have to say on that. But yes, I support the draft rate setting statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Councillor Wallace, nothing further. Councillors, any commentary? Look, just would like to just comment about the fact that we are facing inflationary pressures again. And when we talked about doing, I think there was a comment that's doing the same or no different. The report points out quite clearly that employee costs alone are going to rise by $2.2 million, staffing being our most significant operational cost. Due to a 3.5% enterprise bargaining payment, superannuation increases, and materials and contracts are increasing by 0.8 million. So that's a $2.8 million increase in, effectively doing the same but with increased costs, and the 4.5% rate increase will bring in $1.8 million additional. So that's, a $1 million shortfall there, but we're making it work. We still remain one of the lowest rating councils, and I think as Councillor Loden has talked about, that we have tried to take corrective measures in the way that we operate, that we no longer wish to sort of have depleted reserves, that when you have something like underground power come along, if you have reserves, it means less loans and it means better financial health for the local government. We are dealing with an inner city community where we have quite a good standard of living, and we do have expectations in our community that we will have good facilities, that we'll have public toilets that aren't revolting, that we will have, we'll regularly refresh our parks and make sure that our equipment that we have for our kids is interesting and innovative. So we are trying to do that, but we also have some significant assets, and we've tried to talk about this a lot over the past years, and that's talking about things like Beatty Park. We're talking tonight about Leederville Oval and a master plan to try to attract some stakeholders to come and work with us on that. But we still remain the 8th lowest ranking in terms of rates. That puts us in the well and truly in the bottom third. And I think that people fixate on 4.5%, and I'm sure that will be a headline. It will be added, I'm sure, to 7.6, and it will feature on a leaflet, no doubt. But I think you need to understand that that actually 4.5% when you're looking at our budget is $1.8 million. And when you're looking at the size of our budget, it is actually quite a minor amount overall, $1.30 a week or $67 for the median residential household. I did mention earlier that as part of the what we're advertising is a reduction in the revenue coming from first hour $1, which is being reduced from $800,000 to $400,000. And that will allow us to make a decision and to set fees and charges next month on that when we deal with the budget, which is scheduled to come to our next council meeting. And in speaking to our CFO today, that is on track to reach that timeframe. So whilst it might appear that we're rating more to do the same, I think it has to be pointed out that just alone in staffing and materials and contracts, that's a $2.8 million increase, which is $1 million less than the rate increase will bring in. Any further comments on the draft rate setting statement? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Okay, the next item raised by a member of the public gallery, and it may not have appeared this way because it wasn't specifically mentioned, but Linda Harris did refer to the bike plan at 10.5 in talking about the Britannia Road pathway. So that's 10.5 draft bike plan 2023 to 2028 for consultation. Councillor Loden is moving, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
I'll just ask a question about the query we got from Linda around the access out onto Britannia. If I could get a response on how that will manage through the bike plan.
Through the chair, the current bike plan that's going to go out for consultation soon does have Britannia Road as one of the links. There is two projects that the engineering team's working on at the moment. They're local area traffic management projects, and it does incorporate some cycle facilities into that concept design that's out for consultation at the moment as well.
So I guess I'm supportive of the bike plan. I'm not going to propose to amend that here on the fly, but I think it's really important that administration takes those views on board as part of this, as how we can manage that, because this will go out, we'll get feedback on a whole range of things here. But I think this is effectively feedback through coming to council. So it's important that we incorporate that and consider how we can address those issues. I also do tend to agree that it is challenging along there. If you've got cyclists riding in that space too, I go down to Britannia on a semi-regular basis, and there is a lot of movement around the place. And I would say it is the minority wrecking it for the majority, that people travelling through there too fast. The lycra-clad warriors, which I also happen to be one of those as well, but I don't go through Britannia. We need to find a way. We can't obviously just exclude them, but it's great to be able to make that space safe for people, and that they're not going to be worried about getting knocked over by a bike.
Through the chair, yes, we can take that on board.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, good to see this come through. I think we had quite a few delays before the previous bike plan came forward, and so it's good to see that this one, to replace the last one, has come forward for advertising. We do have a very strong and vocal cycling community in Vincent, so I'm looking forward to the feedback. Thanks.
Councillors, any further comments on the bike plan for advertising? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Okay, the next item raised from the public gallery this evening is item 9.2, which is number 334 to 336 Beaufort Street, Perth. Proposed alterations and additions to shop, roller shutters, unauthorised existing development. Just noting that there are two proposed amendments on the table. Oh, sorry, alternate recommendations. So we will have to deal with the recommendation before us, before any consideration of any alternates, and see how we go. So can I please have a mover and seconder for the motion as recommended by the administration? Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. I acknowledge the comments that have been made in the gallery. I think that this does pose a few challenges in terms of the location. And on the flip side, also having a precedent against policy. But I'm not supportive of the officer recommendation as is. Currently supportive of the alternate recommendation, if we get to that. I think that there does need to be some reinterpretation of how the policy is applied, and some flexibility around some of the arrangements for alternate security. But also do think that in general, shutters aren't what we are after in the city. Thanks.
Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, look, I live about 100 metres from this store, so I'm really well aware of the crime issues around World Square, McDonald's, and as they stretch up Beaufort. And look, the owner has my deepest sympathies for the break-ins and for the installation of these shutters somewhat unwittingly against city's policies. Having said that, though, consistency in decision-making in planning items is really important. Discretion exercised in one location can quickly be exploited in others. And the city has been really consistent in its application of this policy in the local area. The gun shop at the top of William is an example of that. And, you know, similarly in items that have dealt with streetscape interface immediately next door at the chemist, the city, maybe speaking out of turn here, I think is one case in the SAT, kind of enforcing the reconfiguration of that to remove the blanket signage there. So streetscape interface is really important. And I think having vibrant and interactive faces can be a crime reduction measure. Having said that, I do think the proposal or the item as written goes a little bit too far. And I think the alternate would be somewhat of a reasonable compromise in this situation.
Thank you, Councillor Wells. Before I go any further, we have had a lot of information circulated by administration today, which is a bit more sort of site context and also talking about the city's response generally to roller shutters and the sort of work that has happened with many businesses in Vincent. So I just thought I'd give the officers an opportunity to speak to that.
Sure. So in terms of the a little bit of clarification on the context, as Councillor Wallace alluded to, directly adjacent to the site is the Super Chemist located on the corner of Bulwer and Beaufort Street. So the signage that is present on that facade at the moment is still unauthorised. So they have gone through a similar process with the city through a development application for their window signage, which was ultimately refused, and we mediated an outcome at the State Administrative Tribunal. So they are currently working with our compliance team to remove components of their signage. I did circulate some approved elevations of that premises to you all. So ultimately that shop front will open up further, particularly on the corner. I guess in terms of the broader setting, to characterise the site, it really is reflective of an inner city area. It serves as a real activity corridor between the town centres, and there is a really big mix of residential and commercial land uses, really varying in intensity. And that's really because it is an area undergoing transition. So it was really characterised as a commercial area. There's a lot of older style buildings in the area, and that's why you do see those harsh security measures that have existed on those older style buildings in the area. As the planning framework has changed and the vision for the area has changed to this commercial mixed use higher density area, we're starting to see a greater amount of apartments introduced, which is reflected just around the corner at the Luxton Apartments. We've had a few approvals for new developments in close proximity, as well as some new uses pop up with the Woolworths, which we worked really hard with them to make sure that they were adding to the streetscape by providing that interaction and engagement from their supermarket, as well as the introduction of Tom's just down the street, a few more bars, and really that activity flowing down between the centres. So the vision for this area really is to really strengthen that. And as part of that, and a part of the planning framework is to encourage that through the built form at the ground level to really ensure that we're promoting that active street frontages that is visible and engaging with the street day and night. In terms of the approval history, so we did do a big review of precedents in approvals across the city. So a review of the photos that were submitted by the applicant, just to confirm that none of those security measures had received approval from the city. In this area, it is a bit of a hotspot for roller shutters. So in the immediate context between Bulwer Street and Newcastle Street, since 2019, we have refused under delegation, and I think there was one under council approval, 3 roller shutters for refusal, and then one other proposal for roller shutters was withdrawn by the applicant, and all of those roller shutters were removed where they were retrospective. On all of our records, I think it was until 2001, we have only found one approval for roller shutters citywide, and that was at a premises in Edward Street in Perth, which was approved with a condition that the shutters should be closed outside of operating hours, and they were considered in their local context. It's a light industrial area and quite a sensitive land use on a local road. So in that instance, it was considered appropriate. But we don't have any other records for approved roller shutters in the city.
And Acting Manager, just pointing out that this is the context map that's been provided around the table, just to give you an idea of some of those uses. Would it be appropriate to talk about the gun shop manager? Is that appropriate? I know that some of the times these things can be confidential. So.
Sure. Yeah, so in terms of the decision of the gun shop, that is in reference to Mr. Yossi's sports shop on the corner of William and Brisbane Street, just around the corner. They went through a similar proposal where they proposed roller shutters to protect the premises from break-ins from the guns. That was a decision made by council in February 2020. Ultimately, it was decided to be refused. The city worked with the landowners of Mr. Yossi's over a 6-month period and with the WA police to remove those roller shutters and implement alternate security measures.
Councillors, any further questions or debate on this item? Councillor Oplow.
Thank you, Mayor. Administration's recommendation to refuse is well noted, primarily for the to maintain compatibility with the general streetscape. However, I am quite sympathetic to the applicant's cause. I was reviewing section 67 of the relevant legislation, matters to be considered by local government, subparagraph R, which states the suitability of the land for the development, taking into account the possible risk to human health or safety. And my question to administration is when it refers to safety in that subsection, can that be construed? And do we have any precedent that explains safety? Does that mean to possession? Is it to human health only, or to chattels, a person's chattels? That's a question. Thanks.
Yes, through Mayor Cole. It relates to both the safety of the business and their patrons. So the issues that have been raised by the applicant, as well as the safety to the community as a result of the development. So it relates to all of those things. Council just really needs to make a judgment about, where the benefit and cost is. And I think that it's a difficult one because there are clearly costs associated with that. And there are benefits as well for the community on the street. Having a perception of eyes on the street adds a sense of safety, while having the roller shutters there obviously adds safety for the business. So definitely a relevant consideration.
Thank you. And also the objectives of the commercial zone include to facilitate a wide range of compatible commercial uses that support sustainable economic development. So if you have a retail store where you have valuable inventory, then to me, the objectives of the commercial zone would support particular development relevant to an application where it is necessary for the economic viability of that business. So I'm really torn on this one because I can see the technical merits of what administration has put forward in their recommendation, but I also can see avenues legally where council ought to consider that there is an avenue to approve this. And I just think it comes down to where you place your weight. I think streetscape or safety, economic development or consistency in a policy. And obviously with, deemed to comply provisions, there's always discretion for council to exercise in and make exceptions in certain circumstances. So I'm not really sure if this was to be approved by council, whether we are actually setting a precedent to open up the floodgates. Again, that's probably my only other question to administration. I mean, if it was the view of this council to make an exception on the grounds that I've mentioned or others, that I don't think that we're necessarily creating a precedent for the floodgates to open where this could jeopardise an important policy for the city in terms of maintaining consistency with streetscape.
Yes, through Mayor Cole. Every application needs to be considered by council on its merits. And so it wouldn't necessarily set a precedent. And that's not, the precedent itself isn't relevant. Being consistent with the decisions that we've made in the past is very important and very relevant. And consistently, council and administration has has refused similar applications, but similar doesn't mean they're the same. And so there are differences here that are relevant and wouldn't necessarily set a precedent. The only other point I'd make is that we have worked very hard over a long period of time to try and minimise the amount of roller shutters that occur on our main streets and our activity corridors like this. It's not been easy because there are a lot of businesses that have the same and similar issues. Our goal through council's policy has been to try and create streetscapes that feel safer for the community that are walking up and down those streets, so that there are more people walking, and when they are there, they feel safer. That inevitably creates and reduces the safety issues for businesses. That's one issue though, because the other issue is that the reality is on the ground, there is the safety and security issues that this business has highlighted. So balancing those things is really hard. Administration's come to the view that in this case, it's not so dissimilar to all the others, and we recommended that it be refused, but that doesn't mean council has to form that view.
Just one other question that I just thought of too. Is that your position, or the city's position on roller shutters the same as roller doors? Like this building has a roller door for the vehicles. Is there any consistency in how you're applying this, or is that just you can differentiate the two?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, there is a difference. It really comes down again to the merits of the proposal. So if there's a development with a roller door and windows, then that roller door is a very small percentage of, well, I shouldn't say that. What I mean is there is significant surveillance already because of the windows created by that development. If the proposal is for a facade of just roller doors, and then there'd be similar issues with that. But again, we're talking about a new development, not an existing premises. Again, all those things need to be taken into consideration.
I'm pretty divided on this one, so I'm keen to hear the rest of council's questions or views.
Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I went down the other day to actually have a look for myself, and went inside and introduced myself, and then Anthony Hart took me for a walk along Beaufort Street to the corner of Bulwer, and then down Bulwer Street in an easterly direction. And it's interesting to see that part of the council's requirements are that there's a visual connection with the community, i.e. that you can see out through the windows. And I was quite surprised about the number of shop fronts, and of course recognising this is a group of this is a business person that's putting his own money up, and sometimes these decisions get decided by people, by us councillors who don't have skin in the game, as the business people would say. But along that walk, along Beaufort Street and then down Bulwer Street, the number of businesses that had iron bars on, and then they closed the curtains at 5:30. So there's no then visual connection. And the iron bars look a bit like the old bear cage at the Perth Zoo. But here we're talking about we have visual connection, and then the business owner is telling me, well, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one. Now, I guess council would say, so if that's happening there, we'll address that at some stage. But, I think at least 50% of those businesses, had windows that were completely opaque one way or the other after 5:30. And before 5:30 and opening at 9, these roller shutters go up. And, as I understood, and when I read the submission by the cycle shop, one bike can be worth up to $15,000, and so it's probably pretty hard to sleep at night if you haven't got it locked up. So there was a number of issues that I thought we needed to consider, and certainly as a council, what we're saying is this is what we don't like, and then we're saying what we do like is security from the inside. But the security from the inside doesn't work. So, you know, as a group of councillors, you usually like to solve some problem, but this is not solving the problem. This is just putting up some faddish alternative that doesn't work. So, and it is somewhat of a wicked problem, but I'm supportive of the roller shutters being there, because that part of the city and that business actually faces, I think it's called Birdwood Square, which is a park. So it's not facing other businesses. It's not a particular area where people go and stroll at night, unless it's Ashley Wallace strolling at night. You can look after the security, Ashley. But, you know, I think, and having a look at those security shutters in place, you know, the whole building and facade itself is black. So I thought it looked quite all right. So, you know, I have, you know, some sympathy and view that this is one of those exceptions that perhaps should be made.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillors, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for administration in relation to the gun shop. I do recall that decision. It was similarly difficult as this one is. And I'm happy to hear that we were able to work with the applicant in that case to implement an outcome. My question is, what specifically was that outcome, and do you have any information about the effectiveness of their solution?
Yes, through Mayor Cole. So essentially, the outcome that's on the ground now is, well, the roller shutters were removed, and there was security bars, if you like. They're not thick bars, but it's like a mesh that was provided on the inside. And the door still has some level of security screen in front of it. Not for the entire door, for the bottom 3/4, let's say. So that's essentially the outcome that was achieved there. But there is surveillance between the inside of the premises and the street at all times. So those windows it's fully visible at all times.
And is there any evidence of the effectiveness of that, or how the applicant's feeling about it now?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole, we haven't had any feedback from the applicant either having concern or haven't come to us and said that they wanted to seek another alternative. But outside of that, I couldn't comment on the effectiveness of it.
Thank you. Look, I think, as everyone said, these decisions are never easy, particularly when we have knowledge that a refusal, as been recommended in this case, would incur a cost to the applicant, and obviously understanding that they necessarily were not aware that this was unauthorised when they were installed. However, I do note that it is important that we have consistency in decision making. We have dealt with these matters fairly frequently, particularly in this area. I think the gun shop is a really good example of as pretty much high risk as you can get in terms of the goods that are being sold and need to be protected. And I think that in this case, I can't see a reason why this should be an exception to the policy when we were not prepared to make that decision in relation to a gun shop. I do want to entertain the alternate if it gets to that point on the yellow, because I think there is a good middle ground that we can meet with the applicant so that we're not completely refusing the roller shutters, but trying to find a solution with them. And I do have faith that administration is able to do that and come up with a solution that can meet their needs and also meet the needs of the city in terms of creating these visual connection between the street and the businesses. I don't think we can dismiss how important that is, particularly given it's contained in city policies that have been consulted on, that have had feedback from our community. We know that that's important to our community to create street facades that have connection, that are not a row of boarded up and roller shuttered up businesses in the evening. I know that's probably cold comfort to individual applicants, but it is important that we are consistent in applying a policy that we have consulted with our community on. And I'm generally not very fond of making exceptions on the fly without fairly compelling reasons for that. So I'm probably not supportive of the recommendation as written, but overall, I think we do need to be consistent in refusing roller shutters in general, but finding this middle ground with this applicant.
Councillor Hallett, question?
The applicant flagged that there were some issues around putting grills on the inside, I think, of the windows. Can you just comment, administration, if possible, around the feasibility of having alternatives to shutters?
Through you, Mayor Cole, it is possible for them to put the grills on the inside if it's behind the glazing line of the windows and if it still provides that visual connection between the street and the premises. So it is possible.
And through you, Mayor Cole, just in relation to, I think you're specifically referring to the emails this afternoon, or the questions this afternoon, which related to the internal dimension of the brick, the age of the building, those kinds of things. I don't think there's any doubt that it's possible. It's just, but it would come at a cost, and so it may well be, and you know, we haven't assessed this, but it may well be that the internal existing structure of the windows and the brickwork and the walls doesn't allow for security mesh to be provided in one way. So there may be other measures that are required. Certainly something that the city would need to work hard with the applicant to try and come up with solutions to. And given our role is to assess the proposal that's before us and not other options, we haven't done that work yet. So that's something we would have to sit down with the applicant and look at if that was council's decision.
Councillor Oplow, a question?
Yes, just to administration. Thanks, Mayor. If this was approved, is that in perpetuity? Is it only related to the existing applicant for the existing business? Is it for, or is it until there's a change of use application that is put on this particular premises?
Through you, Mayor Cole, in terms of the alternates before you on the pieces of paper, they are specifically tied to the operator or the operation of bicycles on the site. However, it is also available to approve it in perpetuity as well, or for a time limited condition. Any such decision would just need to be grounded in planning reasons.
Just to clarify then, if we didn't specify a condition and it was approved as is that in perpetuity, or is it, or until there's a change of use on the particular building?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if there is no condition, it's approving it in perpetuity.
I'll speak to this because I did have the opportunity to go and meet with Anthony Hart this morning, which was very much appreciated. It was really good to go into the store and to be able to see the store in context and see how the front door works, that the door is a closing glass door, that it's actually not actually sealed in the middle when it's shut, and that because it has the sort of the bracket to have the mechanism, I sort of looked at that and thought there's actually not a way to try to secure that glass door and allow its mechanism to open and close by an internal treatment. So that was really interesting. It was really great to walk the block with Anthony, and at that time the acting manager talked to me about the fact that the city's been going through compliance with the storefront, not immediately next door but two up in the same block, and that shop front was about to pretty much undergo a transformation by removing what is currently thick signage screening material which covers the entire front windows, and that was going to be removed, and that the Superchem will be presenting to the street with an open frontage and shop front. So it did strike me that this issue that we have here, where there's some compliance happening, is actually within this block, and that complaints have come in and they are confidential and we don't get told the details, but it is actually coming from the perspective of what is actually happening in this locality, and that we are seeing a lot of the open frontages being screened from the street with signage, with film, with roller shutters, and that this is actually having an impact. It was really good to walk the street and to see some of the older shops. And yes, I saw the same, that there were some blinds down, and there was some, one had a sort of bit of gating in its window, etc. And it led to the conversation about, are curtains and blinds allowed? And this presumption that yes, that they are allowed, but that is not actually correct. We talked about the fact that it really depends when you received your development approval and what the planning framework said at the time. And if your planning framework, if your development was approved, I think predating the built form policy, where the city has had a requirement for active street frontages, then your condition of approval would be along the lines of, you are to maintain an active presence to the street at all times. That condition would prohibit you from pulling down a blind or putting curtains in place. But planning is an evolving thing, and our planning framework changes over time, and some stores may have been approved many years ago and may not have that condition. So the issue of enforceability and compliance is much more difficult for the city. But it did strike me that where the city has compliance with one business and is achieving the effect of removing film from two major windows, and I think the door, and that we are also now dealing with another where there's a recommendation before us to remove the roller shutters, that it really came down to that issue of consistency in the way that we treat our businesses. That if we were going to start allowing roller shutters on businesses, I think we would actually have to go back to our policy and have a discussion about what the criteria would be where we would allow that. We have many jewellery stores in the city of Vincent. I think there's at least 4 in Mount Hawthorn in the town centre. We have heard about the gun store, where the city made the decision to ask the gun store to take their roller shutters down. That, as Councillor Castle has said, you can't really imagine goods that need a greater protection. And we actually did that in the end with the support of the police. So I also wanted to comment on the area itself, and I do note the issues that have been raised by local residents, by the owners and visitors to the bike shop. At the moment, the City of Vincent is looking at putting toilets into Birdwood Square, and we're under immense pressure on a weekly basis to expand use of sports, sporting clubs being able to play at our field. So it's highly likely in the not too distant future that we'll have sporting clubs playing sport there in the evenings under lights, and that when you put lights, we know at Britannia you bring dog walkers, and that you automatically start having more people at your parks after dark. It is next to a public car park, and that public car park services the Brisbane Hotel and Tom's Wine Bar. Tom's Wine Bar being a new establishment trying to bring some of that nighttime economy back into this area. There's a significant apartment block behind the shop. We've got the Woolworths Highgate on Bulwer Street, sort of within the Bulwer Street block, which is actively addressing the street. We've got a petrol station on the corner, which, if our scheme amendment is adopted, will become a non-conforming use. And in between the town centre and the store, there are many residential developments. So we actually do want this place to be a place that people feel safe to walk, and we do need to support the transition. The city is working with other businesses in the area to support this transition. So it is tough, because I understand the issue around the businesses raising security. And I think that the alternate that I've put on the table addresses in particular the door, but I don't think that we can treat one business differently to the way that we've treated many others in similar circumstances. Are there any further comments in relation to this particular motion? Okay, I'll put this motion. All those in favour of the officer recommendation to refuse the roller shutters? All those against? I declare that lost. unanimously. Is there an amendment coming for, an alternate motion to come forward? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the proposed alternate recommendation on the yellow. Do I
See
need,
if there's a seconder?
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Hallett.
do I need to read that, or are we taking it as understood? Because it's extremely long.
Would you like me to summarise?
Sure.
In short, this allows for the roller shutter to remain over the door, but it requires the roller shutters on the windows to be removed, and it gives the applicant, instead of 28 days as recommended by the previous motion, it gives the applicant 6 months from issuing the notice of determination to do so, which was in line with the situation that the city worked with the Yossi family to achieve at the gun store.
I think I've pretty much outlined my reasons for supporting this alternate. It's still in keeping with the policy in terms of including interaction between the street and the shop, but will hopefully allow the applicant to work with the city to come up with a better outcome that will suit their needs as well.
Councillor Hallett, nothing to say. Councillors, Councillor Uplow.
Just a procedural question, Mayor. So if we're in agreement with part of this, does it have to be, can it be amended, or does it have to be defeated and an alternate motion be moved?
It depends if it's an amendment that's not substantial, that substantially alters the alternate recommendation, because then it becomes another alternate recommendation, or whether it's more minor.
Okay, so a question for administration. I'd be in favour of allowing for approval in its current state for a 3-year period, after which time there needs to be change. The reasoning for that, probably don't need, can I give a reasoning?
That is a substantially different
okay.
motion.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not an amendment. Councillors, any discussion on the alternate recommendation? Councillor Warner.
Apologies if I've got the protocol wrong. I've got an alternative recommendation I'd like to put forward when it's appropriate, because I agree with a lot of this alternate recommendation, but there's parts of it I'd still like to work on.
Well, we have to deal with this first. So if this is successful, then there's no further opportunity to move a further alternate recommendation. If this fails to win support of council, then the councillors can move further alternate recommendations. Councillors, any further debate? Okay, put the alternate recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried. So that's the decision of council. We can't receive any further alternate recommendations. Thank you. Okay, the next item raised is 9.3, which is number 12 Brookman Street. Proposed alterations and additions to a single house. Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Castle.
I support the officer's recommendation as is, and echo the sentiment from the public gallery about that this is a very unique and special part of Vincent, and part of that specialness is the scale of the premises within it.
Anything further, Councillor Hallett? Okay, brief. Thank you. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief too. I'm in support of the officer's recommendation for refusal for similar reasons. I do recall we have in the past approved a second story addition in Brookman Moir, but that was in a very particular set of circumstances given the slope of the block, and I was quite clear at the time, and it was clear in my mind that was not creating a precedent for double story additions in this area. So supportive of the refusal.
Councillors? Councillor Apollo?
This is 9.3, correct? Sorry, I missed it. Yep. I just wanted to make, I'm in support of the officer's recommendation on this, but I did want to make some comment because I think this is a treasure. This area, Brockman Moir Heritage Precinct, is an absolute treasure. And I've been on record, even when there was a decision in 2021 on the importance of preserving that. That is where absolutely preserving the streetscape is important, because this is a significant cultural heritage precinct. It's been recognised with state heritage. It's on the state heritage register. It's won UNESCO awards. It's rare, not just in the city of Vincent or Perth, but also WA and across Australia. And I think it is very important that we maintain the homogeneity and the modest scale of the developments in this area, for the reason other than we would defeat the purpose of why it is treated as a heritage precinct. So absolutely supporting the officer's recommendation in this regard.
Councillors, any further comments? Look, just to note that under the current built form policy, it is permitted to have 2 stories in the Brookman Moir precinct. And I know that the residents indicating that have come in to talk to us that they would like to have some further discussions about the new look at the Brookman Moir guidelines, which will be coming back to council for comment. And I think that discussion will be raised and take place. But in this particular circumstances, I think the administration has been quite clear that it really goes to bulk and scale, overshadowing the impact on the neighbour, the style of I wouldn't necessarily say faux heritage, but sort of not quite following the borough charter principles of really differentiating architectural style from the very, very distinct and important heritage of the Brookman Moir cottages that we have there. So there are significant grounds for refusal that have been put, and I just wanted to acknowledge that it does not expressly go to the 2 stories, but that does go to other issues around bulk and scale, overshadowing and impact, I think, particularly from side views to the neighbours, etc. So yes, I think that, this is a really good example of applications being assessed on their merits, taking into consideration the planning framework and the guidelines. And in this case, it just hasn't met those very stringent guidelines. And, it is R25. We don't have a lot of R25. It's quite low zoning in the city of Vincent. So I think that's also important, because that has much higher requirements around setbacks and overshadowing, and the type of scale of bulk and the scale of development that can be permitted. Are there any further comments? Okay, all those in favour of the officer recommendation to refuse the application at 12 Brookman Street, Perth? It's carried unanimously. Okay, the next item raised in the public gallery is 10.1. And 10.1 is the response to petition Elmer Leake intersection diagonal diversion. Can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for your continued advocacy, Leon. I think it's SNPAG is your acronym you're looking for there. So I was a strong proponent of the diagonal diversion. I think I had a very instrumental role in this happening. It's probably important to acknowledge when you are wrong, which I was, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry that this didn't work. I am actually quite devastated that this didn't work. I thought this was going to be a great way to divert traffic around through that little cut through, and instead it's filtered some onto the main roads, but it's also filtered into our back streets instead, which is a real shame. I think it's really good that we tried something, and it's unfortunate that it didn't work, but I think we should, as a council, try and be innovative. And I really appreciate the respectful way that Leon and the group have engaged with us around this as well. And I think this is going to be a good outcome for the city to take this out. I do hope that we can find a better solution to that cut through of traffic, because it is a problem, and it's not just a problem here. It's a problem in any number of streets that we have around the city, aside from the one just around the back of Beaufort Street, because they there's no way that you can actually cut through. It's not physically possible. So I support the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Councillors? Councillor Castle seconding.
Thank you, Mayor. Would it be impolite to point out that I did not support this when it first came to council, Councillor Loden? I am supporting the officer recommendation before us tonight. The issue of North Perth traffic is something that's plagued this council for quite some time. We have considered a number of different options. We have tried an option. The fact that this was not a unanimous decision at the time and that it has had a trial that has now come back early is a reflection of how difficult this area is to address. But I do think that the four-way plateau that's being proposed is a better outcome for the intersection than the diagonal diversion. And I'd like to echo the comments of Councillor Loden in thanking Mr. Ferios. His engagement with this has been at all times professional and respectful and evidence-based, and that's really appreciated by this council. I think that we do often have difficulty wading through what is traffic evidence versus public sentiment versus a feeling of how things might work. And that is not to discount how these things impact people on the ground, but it is important for us to be able to sift through that and find what will be a good outcome based on the traffic evidence that we have and the results of this trial. So I'm supportive of discontinuing the diversion and approving the installing the four-way platform.
Councillors? Councillor Warner?
I think I voted in favour of this trial, and I echo Councillor Loden's comments that I think it's really important that we do try to be proactive and try and do things. So good on us for doing that, but good on us for acknowledging when it's not actually working. I see that there is a proposed amendment on the table. I'd be really interested in pursuing that because whilst I agree with the discontinuance of the diversion, I'm not 100% sure that the four-way plateau is the correct way to go, and I'd like to just be assured that all possibilities have been considered.
Perhaps I can help. This has been a long process, the North Perth traffic calming proposal, and I think we heard from one of our residents today to sort of remind us where this all started with a petition. And the city actually has looked at so many different treatments. I think we put out to the community first that we were going to do slow points, and we actually approved some slow points in the area. We actually had to have a rescission motion on that because it just became unpopular. We talked about, would they like to have mini roundabouts in this section like they have had on the other side of Fitzgerald Street? And when we went back to the consultation, we put a raft of different options out there. The only thing where there was any consensus was on the plateaus. I would be extremely hesitant to revisit this and open it up again because I really feel that we have been at this for many, many years. We've annoyed an awful lot of people along the way. And I think that the plateaus have proven through data to slow traffic in the area. And to be frank, it's free. Main roads are paying for it. We don't have to. If we do anything else, we have to pay for it. Don't we think we've spent enough money at this intersection? So what I would say, I'm not going to harbour on about it, but my view is consistent as it has always been, and I fully support the removal of this diagonal diversion. I do regret the cost. We should grab with both hands the offer from Main Roads to reinstate the idea of having the plateau there to provide that consistent road treatment throughout this particular precinct of North Perth. And I also just do want to also say thank you to Leon and the North Perth community. I actually did get quite a lot of laughs. I know you shouldn't laugh about these things because it was actually very painful to see this happen, particularly when you don't believe in it. But to see people posting pictures on our Facebook page of flying cars and rally cars, there's a lot of good humour that came to this. I know there was anger as well, but there was a lot of good humour. The way that you've managed this process, Leon, and the way that you've interacted with council members has been extremely positive and respectful. And I just really appreciated that, particularly when you're sort of looking on at something, feeling deeply uncomfortable, and seeing a bit of humour and some goodwill brought to the discussion has been incredibly appreciated. So thank you very much for that. And I'll be very pleased to see this removed, that we have had a go with a high intensity, high impact road traffic treatment. My view is that 40 Ks on our local roads consistently across the City of Vincent is the way to go. And I'm strongly pursuing that, trying to lobby for that to happen. We've got about 60% of the City of Vincent 40 Ks now, and I'd really love to see that become 100% on our local roads, because asphalt is not always the answer. Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Opolo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Look, I have a slightly different view on this. I think, you know, the issue has been, I think it preceded my time on council by many years. So my understanding when it first came to me was that this has been a 4 or 5 year odyssey for the people on, particularly living on Alma Road, in terms of the rat running and the trucks and the issues that has caused them. My view on it is that it's not necessarily like, I think we need something here. I think where we possibly went wrong was the solution that was proposed and ultimately installed at that intersection. I don't see removing what there is now and going with nothing as a good solution, because I think we just come back full circle and we have the same issue. And I don't think that that's something that the Alma Road residents would appreciate, given that the heartache that they've had and the long journey that they've had to try and address the issues. Yes, the trial has shown it's been a success for their street, but obviously every time you implement something, there can be run-on effects for other residents. So I'm a little bit perplexed on this. I would have, you know, if we hadn't have had 3,000 pages to review as part of the materials for this particular council meeting, I would have gone and done a door-to-door down Alma and Leek and actually heard directly from the residents that were most affected, you know, what their view is. The ones that I have talked to have said that they have wanted the trial to continue so that the full data set was there. And then to the extent that the diagonal diversion was causing other problems, that then work out what it is that you move to that addresses both sets of communities. My experience on this has been contrary to what Mayor Cole has said. I've received phone calls and for people who shall remain unnamed, who is quite abusive about the effects for them, and not really giving so much consideration to those on Alma Road. So I've also heard a lot of vitriol in online media, particularly directed against residents on Alma Road, which I think is just appalling, because what we're all trying to do is foster a community spirit. And I don't think that those types of things are really conducive. I think we should all get together and they should come together and find a solution that works for everybody. Because I think with a lot of things, problems like this can best be resolved by the community who are most affected. They're the ones that are on the ground who are experiencing the issues day to day. And I think that I would have appreciated this item to be deferred, where to get more information and feedback from the Alma Road residents. So I'd like to propose a deferment motion at some point when you think it's appropriate, Mayor, to defer it for.
Just before you do that, just that you've mentioned that nothing will be put in its place. The proposal is to put a 4-way plateau into its place. I just wanted to point that out to you. Has everyone spoken who would like to speak?
Could I just finish off what I was saying?
Yeah, I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
So Councillor Alexander still wishes to speak. So my advice is to not move the deferral motion yet, because Councillor Alexander's indicated he would like to speak after you. So if you'd like to conclude your statement.
Yeah. So I would like to, I'm not convinced that well, I'm not sure if the four-way raised plateau is the solution. So I just didn't want to go through another round of removing something with the cost associated, putting this in, and then not being absolutely 100% sure that we think that this would resolve everyone's concerns. One of the questions I did ask at briefing was whether the petition that was received was well represented by residents on Alma Road, and I didn't get a chance to circle back to find out what the response was at. So I would just appreciate a response from administration.
Through the chair, the petition that was received had 96 signatures, and all the signatures were from local residents. The online petition, we're not sure of the details. That's an online one, so it's the formal petition that was received with the 96 signatures were all locals.
All right, we're nothing further.
Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. Look, cars have to go somewhere. You know, people buy their houses knowing that there's traffic. You know, I'm fully supportive of administration's suggestions in this, but they take down what's there and put in a four-way plateau and get on with it. You know, I think there's certainly been enough spent on that intersection there. There's been a trial. The trial just sent cars down other local roads. So where else are they going to go? So I know lots of stories from people who just circle around and just go down and still use Leake Street. They just do a circle. So I'm supportive of administration suggestions.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Any further comments? Councillor Upload, do you wish to move your deferral motion? Please do then.
I move to defer this till the next meeting.
Is there a seconder for the deferral? There's no seconder, so the the motion lapses. Any further comments before I put the motion to the vote? Okay, I'll put the motion as recommended. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Upload voting against. I declare that carried. The diagonal diversion comes to an end. Okay, I note that we've got 3 people here. I think you're all here for 10.1. Is that correct? The motion, you're just having a nice time. Thank you. It's nice to have a few people that enjoy watching us. Okay, so because we do have an item with some confidential attachments, I just wanted to deal with all of the items that we have had raised with us in the public gallery. So I was just seeking some advice on whether we can go to the notice of motion, which is 13.1. Ordinarily we'd deal with general business first, but if I get a procedural motion from the floor to allow for that change of business, then we can go to that. So the procedural motion would be that we go to 13.1 rather than following the usual protocol in the meeting procedures. So is that what council would like to do? If so, can someone please move that? Councillor Wallace is moving it. Councillor Hallett is seconding that. All those in favour? Declare that carried. So that means that we can go to the notice of motion, which is 13.1, which is from Councillor Alexander, reintroduction of the first hour free in car parks. Councillor Alexander, I'm assuming you wish to move your motion.
And speak to it?
I just need a seconder first, but I'm just checking that you wish to move it.
Yes, I do.
Yes, and seconded by councillor Apollo. Go ahead.
Well, look, I think this trial is a little bit like Leake Street, has had its time and certainly hasn't been a success. And, you know, firstly, you know, I'm recommending that the 1 hour free be reintroduced, as you can see there, and then advertised. The drop in parking transactions, you know, from the first 6 months of the trial was actually 100,000 and not 50,000 as suggested, and extrapolated over a year. That's something like 200,000 cars less. And if it was one person per car, that's 200,000 people. If it was two per car, that's 400,000 people. So it was probably in the middle somewhere there, about 300,000. And you know, that's a significant loss to business people who are losing customers. I think someone said it was about a 16% loss. So it's a significant thing. And you know, I note that the CEO, David McLennan, has introduced a first hour free City of Vincent exercise. And I think, David, this is about user pay parking by Lindsay Snyder. And if I can quote, he talks about at the heart of the resistance to pay parking is a sense of entitlement to free parking. Many assume that people should be free to go where they please, that a city's public parking is like air and water. It belongs to everyone, not a public resource to be shared by all, but a scarce commodity. He also says parking management is often quite counterintuitive. Steps that appear to be aimed at making it easier, such as building more parking, making it free, or not having time limits, tends to encourage more people to drive and all stay longer, which ends up making it harder to find a space. I guess some people would say it was good that they stay longer because they're probably going to spend more. But you know, I think that like the Leake Street parking, we've tried, we've done the 1 hour free. We are, unlike the parking consultant suggests, with his own philosophy, we do have to take into account competition from, you know, other councillors, and we've got to take into account the history of the City of Vincent when we're looking at parking. And I think that the trial has been a failure. There has been a significant reduction in cars coming into the business districts, of which, you know, there's efforts by the City of Vincent to support our businesses, and this is one that's counterproductive to our businesses being successful. So the recommendation is there to remove the 1 hour parking.
Councillor Apollo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Alexander. I've been on record of having concerns with the removal of 1 hour free previously. And when that did come up, just to remind council that I did go out and do an extensive community consultation and went to the car parks in Mount Lawley, Leederville, and Gove Street, and actually got a survey and feedback from 500 users of the car parks to try to preempt what they would do. And that confirmed that the 95% said their frequency to visit the car parks with the removal of 1 hour free would be significantly or materially reduced. Now we come close to a full year, and the results from the trial have indicated, as Councillor Alexander has said, that there's 200,000 vehicles per annum reduced to our town centres. If you make an assumption about the average number of people in each vehicle, that could be 300 to 400,000 people less visiting. Retail is a business that survives month to month. Just like Mayor Cole said, as some of the inflationary pressures that the City of Vincent is experiencing in terms of employee costs and materials, retail is even more hit on top of that, and inflation. It's hit by falling transactions, and this is a significant amount. So, I have a lot of sympathy for the retailers. I think they've gone almost 11 months through this, so 9 months through this period where their businesses are suffering, and I don't see any reason why we should defer what I think is inevitable, that we'll have to remove this, because the effects to our urban centres has been disastrous, to say the least. I'm in favour of Councillor Alexander's motion, and also noting last month that the majority of other councillors also felt the same. I think we have the required numbers in the room to actually force a change, and I encourage councillors to stop the pain for our retailers before too much more damage is done and people don't visit our urban centres. We can spend all the money we want to make, on thriving places, and try to encourage people to visit the centres, the urban centres. We can have thriving strategies, which is on the agenda tonight, about encouraging small business. But if we don't back it up with car parking, which is the lifeblood of retail, then those things will fall by the wayside anyway. They're really toothless. So I'm in favour.
Thank you, Councillor Upload. Councillors? Perhaps I could just ask a question, because I note the intent, but I think administration's response probably needs a bit more fleshing out. So it says in the admin response here, Section 6.19 of the Local Government Act provides if a local government wishes to impose any fees and charges under this subdivision after the annual budget has been adopted, it must, before introducing the fees or charges, give local public notice of its intention to do so and the date from which it is proposed the fees or charges will be imposed. So in practical terms, if council was to support this motion tonight, what chain of events would that cause, and when could this actually be put in place?
Through Mayor Cole, similar to the item in relation to advertising of the differential rating strategy, would need to advertise this proposal for 21 days in the local newspaper and take on public submissions. And if there were any public submissions about the change to the fees and charges, we would need to come back to council at the next available meeting. We wouldn't, if we're doing that as quickly as possible, we wouldn't make the council briefing for June, but similar to what we're planning to do in terms of advertising the differential rates, we would be able to get a report back to council for the June OCM. But next month, council adopts all fees and charges throughout the entire city of Vincent for all our fees and charges across our facilities and all the car parks as part of the annual adoption of fees and charges in the annual budget. So the timing of the decision would be June next month. And then once council's adopted all the fees and charges, we implement that from the start of from the adoption of the annual budget, which hopefully will be in the start of the financial year.
So so you're saying that the earliest this could be, the decision could effectively be made, that the decision would have to give public notice tonight for that to take effect, and then a decision to cease first hour free at its earliest would be on the 20th of June, with 10 days remaining of the financial year. But then it also talks about the fact that it would take a week to reprogram the machine. So would this actually take effect before the 1st of July?
Through Mayor Cole, no, it'd be very difficult, depending on whether there are any public submissions coming back to that. But in any case, council has to set fees and charges once a year in June. So council will be adopting all fees and charges for all car parks, for Beatty Park, for all other facilities, dog, cat registration in June for the entirety of next financial year. So that decision will be made once a year for all fees and charges next month regardless.
Okay, thank you for answering those questions. Councillor Alexander, do you have a question?
The question is, this was a trial. And I understand it has a budgetary effect, but nevertheless, this is interpreting the data of the trial. This is not a normal budgetary process. This is something that was floated.
Councillor Alexander, you do need to ask a question because you've already spoken. Otherwise, you're effectively closing debate before others have the chance to speak. So do you have a question that you would like to ask?
Yes, I was trying to ask it. This was a trial. So surely we can end the trial without going to section 3, number 5 and every other section with regards to the budget, because my understanding this wasn't locked in to the budget because it was a trial.
Through Michael, what the decision was to set fees and charges throughout the City of Vincent once a year, which is what we do. And Council usually does that in June with the annual budget. Council's decision was to provide a report on the impact of the implementation of $1 free in April and in time for Council to make a decision on setting annual fees and charges in June, which will be next month. So Council can amend fees and charges outside of that annual setting once a year. But to do that, it needs to invite public submissions on that change, whether it's a change in a BD Park membership or a change of any of the car parking or any of the waste charges we adopt. If it doesn't matter what the significance or cost of that change is and whether it's up or down, outside of the annual budget process, once a year, Council needs to publicly advertise any change to the fees and charges for 21 days.
Well, one further question then. There was a number of statements made that if this wasn't a successful trial, then we'd just finish it up. So what you're saying now is there has to be a whole process with regards to the budget.
Through Mayor Cole, there's always a process to the budget. It takes about 6 months to put together through all the fees and charges. On parking in particular, I've circulated to Council a draft, the review of our current strategy and a proposed new car parking strategy, including new precinct management plans, proposing to change the approach that we don't just set car parking fees once a year, but it's done and reviewed on a more dynamic basis, depending on the situation on the ground in terms of occupancy of those car parks and depending on what else might be happening in the town centre. And for Council then to have a more responsive approach to car parking, depending on the local conditions of the town centre. So we're not treating Mount Hawthorn identically to Mount Lawley or to North Perth to Leederville or Northbridge to West Perth, for instance.
No, CEO, the question I'm asking is, this was a trial and it was said if this trial wasn't successful, that it would be wound up. Now, 200,000 cars, would you say 200,000 cars a year and possibly 300,000 people? Would you call that a success? Less?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we put the report to Council last April, and you can interpret that data in many different ways. And the car parking is a very dynamic business. And the draft report I've circulated to Council on the car parking strategy shows that there are many different aspects that feed into driver behaviour in general, and also the demand and supply for limited car parking throughout the City of Vincent. And what we're proposing is a step change in how we approach car parking in the City of Vincent going forward, that we don't do it on a very rigid basis just once a year, but we more actively manage our car parks, and we actively manage those car parks in response to the conditions on the ground.
Is it correct that there was a 16% drop in patronage?
Through Michael, I can recirculate the report to Council that we put together last April, if you wish.
No, I don't wish. I wish you to answer the question. Is 16% drop in patronage a success?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not in a position to advise whether or not the change in the number of cars going to any particular car park was 100% or 0% related to whether or not there may be a change in fees and charges, because there's not a direct correlation just between the price and whether or not somebody goes to a particular car park. People go to particular town centres, shopping behaviour, driving behaviour, whether they choose to walk, whether they might choose to cycle, whether they might choose to take public transport, a new e-scooter, whether they choose to park on the street or whether they choose to park on within one of our car parks, or within a private car park, or within a side street. So there are many different aspects to that. What I can't tell you based on that data is if 100% of the change in occupancy at one point in time to do with one change in one car parking fee may be 100% related to that change, or whether it could be other influences, including the change in the economic conditions.
Madam Mayor, I'll stop asking questions now because I can't get a straight answer.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, ma'am. So maybe just to clarify on timeframes here, if this is agreed, administration publicly advertises, then it comes back to our June meeting. And then assuming that is then agreed, then we go through a process of updating our machines potentially around about the 1st of June. If it's not considered, then it goes into we potentially will effectively reconsider this again as part of the fees and charges. And currently, does administration have a view on where that's going to sit, on what they're proposing to include in the fees and charges, or is that still to be determined?
Through Mayor Cole, we've scheduled a council workshop next Tuesday to focus entirely on the review of our car parking strategy. And what I've circulated to council tonight is a proposed change in the fees and charges for the Mount Lawley Beaufort Street Town Centre, including a reduction in what we're charging for car parking in those 3 car parks, including a change in the Barley Street car park. And that'll be up to council to decide whether or not to change not just what we charge in the first hour or whether we charge anything, but in the second hour, the third hour, and what the maximum fee could be. So there's multiple aspects to how we do car parking fees and charges. For a number of hours, a maximum fee on street and within the car park. And there's in your email inbox today, you would see a comprehensive report on every aspect of car parking in that town centre. And over the next few months, we'll be completing and submitting to council tailored precinct management parking plans for each town centre, not just a blanket one-size-fits-all approach.
Thank you, CEO. So I haven't had the opportunity to read that as yet, as it came through today. I do look forward to having that discussion next week, although I do notice that I am on leave, so that's going to be interesting. I'll have to be creative around that. From my perspective, given the timeframes, I think we do need to address this issue of 1 hour free. But given the timing, we're effectively in the same position, whether we do it now and then go through this public advertising and so forth, or we do it at the budget process next month. I would prefer to have the additional information. I do also feel like there's a nuanced approach here as well. I can see very clearly the issues in North Perth and Mount Lawley. I'm less convinced in Leederville, for example. And so I'd like to get some more information to understand that better as well before we make that decision. And I recognise that the business community wants clarity on this, and they're now going to wait further time to get clarity on it as well. But from my point of view, I'm happy to have that additional information to help inform us, to then inform our rate setting statement and our budget as well. Recognise I'm doing a massive backflip here, as this is a night for apologies for me as well, I guess. So I'll continue with that theme, because I did previously support a pretty similar motion at the last council meeting. Thank you.
Councillor, who had the hand up first? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I do understand the intent of this notice, but my position hasn't changed from April. And that position was that I can see there is a discussion that needs to be had around the reintroduction of first hour free. I think there's probably growing evidence, and the report in April was lacking in connective data, but I'm certainly happy to accept that there's evidence it has had a significant impact on businesses, particularly in Mount Lawley, and will be very willingly having a discussion about reversing that decision in some form. However, I'm not prepared to do that until we're in the budget process. And that is the same position I had in April. The reason for that is because this is not an isolated decision that we can make without acknowledging the impacts on the rest of the budget and what that means for other services and other provisions that we need to make in that budget. And bringing it forward by 1 month doesn't really achieve much. It gives us perhaps less than a week of change before we're reviewing our fees and charges again. What it does do, though, is lock part of our budget into place before we're considering the entire thing as a whole. As the CEO said, we're having a session on parking next week. There are a number of other very complex issues to consider as part of this budget. And in my time on council, I've never seen a situation where we have locked in one element before considering the entire budget, and I'm not seeing a reason to do that this time. I do also want to address the question of the trial and the timing that's been referred to in the chamber and in the gallery. And I did this in the April meeting, and I'll do it again now and go back to what the decision of council was last year. And that was to request administration monitor the impact to the number of transactions and revenue following the change to $1 for first hour to ascertain any detrimental impact on occupancy or use in the city car parks, and provide a report back to council by April 2023 in time for setting fees and charges for the 2023-24 annual budget. What we have been doing is entirely consistent with that motion that was passed in July last year. I think probably at the time there was anecdotal reference to this as a trial, but the effect that my interpretation of the legislation and what council decided at that time is when we're talking about setting fees and charges, there is no such thing as a trial that gives it any different weight than the fees and charges for the financial year. We set those fees and charges each year, we review them each year, and we set them for the next financial year. So every fee and charge on that list is effectively a trial, because we will review it and change it if necessary. So I think there's this, there seems to be a lot of weight being given to the word trial, when in actual fact we are, as we do each year, reviewing evidence of how our services have worked, how the changes we've made have worked, and deciding whether we stick with that or revert or go back to or change to something new again. So I do understand that may be how it was perceived and how it's been counted on in the public, but we are being consistent with what was decided, and we are reviewing these fees and charges as part of our budget process. So I do really sympathise with the businesses, and I understand their desire to have a decision early, but I'm also not prepared to rush the budget process for that purpose. And I don't think we achieve anything by trying to address this month when we are about to address it in June. So I'm not supporting this notice of motion, but as I said at the outset, I'm absolutely willing to consider and will seriously consider the reversal of this in some form in the next lot of fees and charges. I don't consider my non-support of this notice of motion to be a decision on whether we will continue to charge $1 for the first hour. That is a decision that I'll make next month as part of the budget process.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I've gone back and forth a little bit on this one. I do actually lean now towards removal of the $1 in Mount Lawley, but I can't support the motion as is because it applies to all of the town centres. And given the fact that we're going to be making a decision next month anyway, it doesn't change the timeline. It gives us more context, and we also have the parking, the precinct plans, which, depending on what we go ahead with, that would increase potentially the number of free bays in Mount Lawley anyway. So I'm comfortable that we make the decision next month as part of fees and charges, and happy to consider where we have nuanced changes between town centres and potentially not the $1 in Mount Lawley.
Councillor Warner.
Thank you. I've always backed the intent behind Councillor Alexander's notice of motion, the returning to the 1 hour free parking that we had in place before the change. I'm not going to use the word trial. I believe that this review has been undertaken and the ensuing data has been presented, and we must now decide whether or not we want to make it a permanent change. For me, it comes down to how to implement the cessation of this. And I've spoken with numerous people for advice over the last few days. And it appears that at this time of year, the diligent thing to do would be to wait and address this via the upcoming budget workshop where the fees and charges are set. And that would be basically maybe the more streamlined course of action. However, I feel it's necessary to speak up now while I have the opportunity, and I support Councillor Alexander's notice of motion, would prefer us to take this chance to deal with this issue as we can now. Whilst it may be a simpler way to deal with it via the workshops, it's also a risk, and it does nothing to ease the anxiety in the community. I believe this reversal needs to be implemented and the $1 free incentive needs to be reinstated as soon as possible, subject, of course, to the 21 days notification. I'm not so sure about we need a comprehensive marketing campaign to spread the word, because I'm quite sure that the local grapevine will do that of its own accord, much as they have already with their comments of their disapproval. And I also think our administration is ably resourced to manage that, but I support this notice of motion.
Councillors, a question?
Yeah, just a resident just texted me saying that to check, they think that, is it correct that it's 3 weeks to advertise? They're saying it's 14. Can I just get clarification from administration?
Through Mayor Cole, to check whether it's 14 days or 21 days public advertising of a change in fees and charges. We just have to check the act, if you can bear with us. Is that on notice, or do you want that response now?
If it's relevant to the decision, because people are talking about timing, so probably yes, it would be good to know now. Do you want to proceed with the next question? Yep. Next question. Isn't it correct from the data that was distributed last month that the Avenue car park, the biggest car park in Leederville, actually had a drop of 17%? You can treat it as rhetorical if you like.
Councillor Plow, it's actually incumbent upon you to incumbent upon you to ask bona fide questions and not seek to try to further debate through asking questions that potentially are just to seek to further debate.
I can clarify that. Thank you for expressing your concern, but part of the justification in the room was that that a deferral made sense because they don't believe that the drop in visitor numbers is across all car parks. So I was just wanting to check that Leederville, that's recognised that Leederville is hurting and it's 17% drop.
Debating, Councillor Plow.
I asked the question, can I clarify that it is a 17% drop in the Avenue car park in Leederville?
Through Mayor Cole, the data is contained in the report that went to council last April, but I can distribute that to you again if you need it.
I just wanted to clarify because I've got the data in front of me, but I just want to check that it's not incorrect. That was what was distributed.
Through Mayor Cole, the report that went to council in April was based on the data we had at the time.
Can I just ask how long it's going to take to find the answer to that question? Will it be a lengthy process?
In short, the Local Government Act doesn't prescribe a number of days. It simply says that local public notice will need to be provided. So it doesn't specify a number of days. The 21 days would come from our consultation policy.
Consultation policy. Councillor Plow. Yep,
One more
ask
question.
a question, a proper question, please.
Yeah, sure. What is my question now? Yeah. is it correct that the loss, if we were to remove 1 hour free, it's been said that it's 800,000 approximately as the loss of revenue. However, is that correct when, given that 50,000 of the 100,000 in the trial period was above 1 hour, where we're paying $3 to $4 per rate? I just wanted to check that we're definitely sure that 800,000 is the loss.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the forecast revenue from the dollar for people paying the $1, then you pay whatever the extra is for the second hour includes the dollar. That estimate of $800,000 was our forecast for the annual revenue from the introduction of the dollar for the first hour, based on the numbers of tickets that have been issued.
Do we have any actual figures on the incremental revenue, which does take into account the fact that half the drop in visitor numbers is for people staying over 1 hour, where the rates significantly increase? So that would be a significant decrease in the revenue.
Through Mayor Cole, we did provide some other figures in terms of the parking revenue in the report that went to council last April, but I can
Councillor
circulate
Apollo,
that
you're
again.
telling me that you have the data and the information in front of you and you're continuing to ask the questions. I would actually like to have to say my debate, if you could please bring your questions to an end.
So could I just address that? I only had the data about the Avenue car park. I didn't have the 800,000. It just occurred to me now that if half the drop in visitor numbers are above 1 hour, then there should be a significant drop in revenue, because making $1 for 1 hour versus losing, say, $3 after 1
This is
hour
not a
is a significant
question.
thing. I was clarifying your challenge on my legitimacy of my question. I didn't have the answers. It was a legitimate question. Thank you, Mayor.
Any response for administration on the question?
Through Mayor Cole, I don't think Councillor Apollo was here for the council meeting last month where this report went to, so I could just undertake to recirculate that council report on that item to Councillor Apollo, because he was absent last month.
Yeah, it's on Docs on Tap. All right, so look, I'd just like to address this because first and foremost, whilst you've raised questions about the revenue, it is really important to note that administration has reduced car parking revenue in the differential rates for advertising from 800,000 to 400,000. That shows a clear intent by administration and council to address parking and to reduce revenue from parking in the City of Vincent. And I think that's really important to raise that, because that is actually a decision that was before us this evening and that has now been adopted for advertising. Look, it might be a statement piece to say that you support this motion tonight, but it's practically totally impractical to say that we're going to advertise something for 21 days, to take public comment, to pay to put public notice in the report, to have an officer prepare a report, go through all the consultation so that we can effectively make a decision on the 20th of June that we would ordinarily be making on the 20th of June, which is in line, as Councillor Castle has outlined, with the decision that we made when we adopted the budget, to take all of this data and information so that we could have, so that we could use that when we set fees and charges for the 2023-2024 annual budget. So it effectively takes us to the same decision point to make a decision on the budget for the fees and charges. You might be fortunate and get 10 days, but the rangers are saying it will take them a week to program the machines. It doesn't make any sense. It's not practical. It's not a good use of the city's resources to make a statement without actually being practical. And I would actually be embarrassed to do it that way, because what are we actually saying to the community? We're advertising something to you for 21 days to make a decision on the day that would ordinarily be making the decision. It's just not, it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I am very happy to look at first hour free back in Mount Norley. We have reduced the revenue by half, giving a clear indication that we're looking at the car parking. But I would like to look at all car parks, including Leederville, where we have a process afoot at the moment to look at redeveloping our car parks, brand new multi-storey car parking, where we'll have to then again look at car parking fees. So to chop and change in Leederville without having some view to the future, from my perspective, is highly problematic. So for those reasons outlined, I'd just like to indicate that, yes, I'm giving serious consideration to first hour free back in some of our town centres. I think our secondary centre, Leederville, we do need to look at that. We need to look at that strategically and in context with our proposal for the future of Leederville. But I do think it's nonsense to say that you'd go out and advertise something for 21 days and effectively make the same decision that we're making in any case on the 20th of June. So I don't support the motion. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken that wishes to speak? Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. I'll keep it brief. I don't support the motion as written as well. I think the reasons around process have been really well articulated at the moment. I also just don't support the blanket rollback of $1 parking. I think a more nuanced approach is required. I'm very aware of the significant issues that supermarkets in Mount Thorley are facing. Parking is one issue. I don't think we can understate the impacts of Highgate, Woolworths opening as well. So I don't think the city can bear all responsibility for the downturns there. But having said that, support of local independent business is one of our key objectives through the strategic community plan. And so some nuance around parking policy may be required in that area. But yeah, really looking forward to a workshop on this on Tuesday and then making a more definitive decision in accordance with correct budgeting processes on it next month. Thank you.
I think everyone's spoken. So Councillor Alexander, would you like the right of reply before we take the vote on your motion?
Look, I just say that when 1 hour parking was introduced, that when the City of Vincent was represented in the media with people who certainly were opposed to it, and then people at the City of Vincent who were defending it, it was said it was a trial, and then people representing the City of Vincent in reply to the difficulties and people have been unhappy with the 1 hour parking said, if it's unsuccessful and it's not working, we'll simply get rid of it. And if anyone wanted to do a search of the media at the time, they would find those statements made. Thank you.
And as the spokesperson who is quite obviously making those statements, I stand by those statements. And I'm just saying that I'm indicating that this is going to be dealt with next month, as it was the decision when we adopted the budget. And I'm doing that as a right of reply because you're making statements which I think adversely reflect upon me. So we've closed debate now. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that lost with Councillor Ipolo, Councillor Warner and Councillor Alexander voting in favour. Now, we do have to go to an item where we have consultants that have very patiently been waiting. So we'll go to that item now. And that is item 9.4, request for proposals for redevelopment of Leederville car parks. Now, just before we commence this item, I would just like to say that the report itself and the motion is public. There are some attachments are public, but I think the ones where there might be questions are actually under confidential. And we do have a confidential amendment on the table. So my proposal in the way that we deal with this, given that it is a public item, is that I'd like to see whether there is a mover or seconder who's comfortable to speak to the item publicly. And then if any others wish to follow and publicly speak to the item, they can do so. But if councillors then after that have questions that they would like to ask that are confidential and that have amendments they would like to move that are confidential, then we will have to move to behind closed doors. So on the basis of that advice, could I please call for a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, ma'am. So to speak generically, because of the confidential items, I'm supportive of the officer recommendation in this case. I guess my observation is this is quite different from what we typically consider at a council meeting. And the most best analogy I can come to is this is almost like working through a development proposal or a major infrastructure development or something like that you see commonly in the resource sector and other sectors as well, which I have a bit of experience in over the last 15 years. And the challenging part about all this is that you're making a decision earlier in the process than we typically would make. This is not a FID quality decision. We don't have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And what we're really trying to do is make sure that the concept that we've come up with is, based on the information we have available, the best option for us to proceed. The hard part, and I guess the challenge for us as councillors, particularly those that are less familiar with these types of processes, is that you don't have all that information to hand. And the desire is to disappear into the detail, is to delay the decision making because you don't have everything. What we are really trying to do here is to provide a clarity of direction around what we're doing. Now, when I look at this, the options that we have on the table, we have a commercial assessment of it, and we have a non-commercial assessment. I can't remember the term for it, so but everybody knows what I mean. Sorry. Qualitative assessment. I can't believe I forgot that. That used to be my catchphrase for about a year. Both show that there is one option that is preferred in that case. Now, there are potentially scenarios where that might not become the best option compared to another option from a commercial point of view or a qualitative point of view. But based on the available data and the information that we have, that is the best option. And that's why I support this. Now, the point is also that this isn't effectively locking us into an FID decision. We have an exit strategy here as well. And so where I've seen this replicated in the resources sector, you're going through something called concept select, saying, looking at all of this, we've refined our options down. We want to cement in one option so that we can then go through the much more expensive process of doing effectively a detailed design. And the reason why you do that is because you don't want to carry multiple options. It becomes horrendously expensive. So typically in a project life cycle, 5% of your resources are spent to this point. The next stage in detailed design effectively is about 20%. And then the remaining 75% is the actual execution of it. If we try and get detailed design level information, to be honest, the proponents would probably walk away because we're wasting their time. Or they're going to require us to pay for that service because they don't have any confidence that we're actually serious about doing what we're doing. That being said, if we get to the end of what I'll effectively call a detailed design process and we are dissatisfied with that outcome, we always have the opportunity to recycle. And that's a very common process in the resources sector. We get to the end of it and go, what did we say it was going to be at the beginning? What has changed over that time? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Generally it gets worse, but anyway. At that point, there is a new decision to say, do we want to proceed with this, or do we want to take the off-ramp and go back around and look at the other options that we had on the table at that time and redesign? Or do we want to go and do something completely different? Or do we decide that this is actually not a good idea at all and we're not going to do any of this stuff? And all of those things I've seen taken when I've been involved in these processes. I think that's the end of my train of thought. So I didn't really finish that very well. But ultimately, I'm supportive of the Office of Recommendation. I reckon we're going to have some robust debate about this. This is a really, really big decision. But I guess my encouragement to council is to lean into this idea of actually moving forward and not get caught in the minutiae of it. And I think probably one of the best examples I saw of this was Woodside ran 2 parallel feeds and spent $2 billion on the Browse project and didn't do either of those options. And so let's make sure that we can try and lock in on one option and move forward in a constructive way. Thank you.
Also, I just wanted to acknowledge John Del Gosso and Ian Mickle, our advisors from Signet West, have joined us. And also Kevin from Stanton's, Kevin Donnelly, my apologies, Kevin, mental blank. So yes, we'll just get Kevin to appear on the screen. Thanks, CEO. That was seconded by Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'll be a bit quicker just to say I I support the officer's recommendation. And just wanted to comment that this is such an exciting point to be in this process. Big appreciation to Cygnet West and Stanton's for their work so far. Sitting through the one of the meetings maybe 6 months ago now, where we had the original presentations of the proposals, I was super pleased to see the quality of applications that we got. I think we've had a really robust, high quality process thus far. This is one of multiple decisions still to come, and it's good to be at this point, and I look forward to moving forward.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. I want to echo the comments of councillors Loden and Hallett, and thank Councillor Loden for that very excellent summary of the process that has certainly given me more clarity as to how this sits in the commercial context as well. I think for me, what has always been important through this project is the process that we've set and the process that we're following. And I think we've had multiple decision points in order to get to the point we're at today. And I have confidence that we both set a process that was appropriate for the project that we are embarking on, and that we have followed that. And I very much thank our consultants for their advice and their expertise in this area, because that is what can give us the confidence to move forward with the next stage, which, as Councillor Loden said, is not locking us into one particular project, a particular design, but is simply indicating that we want to move forward in our courtship of one of our proposers, still leaving our options open to date others if we're not happy with the particular relationship that is formed. That was a very heavy-handed metaphor, but I do think that it is important that we acknowledge that we have been through a robust process already, but we do have multiple decisions to come, and so there are lots of fail-safes in there for us to ensure that at the very end of this process we're satisfied with the outcomes. I think it's very true what Councillor Hallett said, that the quality and level of applications that we've attracted is really impressive. I'm very keen that we move forward with them and not jeopardise their participation. And so I'm really happy to support this and really excited to see what comes next.
Councillors, any further debate? Councillor Uplow, you're speaking in the public session and you only get one opportunity to speak to the motion.
Does that just apply to me or to everybody?
To everybody.
Okay. So what's the point? Different to any other? Sorry.
Well, it's just because you've put a confidential amendment on the table.
I don't think that's confidential, but and I'm happy to have that.
Well,
play
the
out.
view of administration is it's confidential and it's been marked,
sure.
so
Okay.
please respect that.
Sure. So I'll talk to the substantive.
Yes.
Okay. So the decision to dispose of significant public land in Leederville Centre is likely the biggest decision this council will make. It's important because once the land is sold, the city loses its ability to address future community need within the Leederville Town Centre, not just for a generation, but in perpetuity. It's complex because if we relinquish land to develop and retain parking, we need to invest in a multi-storey depreciating car park that's expensive to operate, maintain, and depreciates over time. So I guess the risk to ratepayers is that they could be worse off because the car park build cost could exceed the proceeds from the land sale, and the net car parking revenue is lower than what we receive now because of the cost to run the car park. But now that we have the stage 2 proponents' proposals, it's incumbent on council to consider all options before nominating a preferred proponent and progressing to legals, and not just accept what the developers have put forward at their own accord and volition. I think other councillors have mentioned what they've done in their professional life, but in local government, other local governments wouldn't do it the way we've done it. City of Melville would have prescribed exactly what they want, and then they would go to tender so that the outcomes are clear as to what success looks like. What is the optimal qualitative build that they seek? And then they can compare commercially against something that is quite similar. I think it's also not good governance to go forward and choose a preferred proponent when we haven't actually considered all alternatives that aren't on the table. So just to look at the 3 shortlisted proposals and not to think about a do nothing scenario or a sell a land for development and that's it, and not retain car parking, all these options need to be looked at. I'll give you 4 examples. 1, should we sell the land as a development site, rely on the Leederville precinct structure plan to deliver the desired qualitative outcomes, but require a developer to build a commercial car park that it retains? We pocket tens and tens of millions of dollars theoretically, and maybe the additional rates revenue from higher density makes up for the loss of existing subsidised parking. Scenario 2, instead of 2 expensive multi-storey car parks on each site, why not build one larger one at, say, the Avenue and consider, say, 30 short-term ground level parking spots at Frame Court for amenity? Does this produce a superior commercial result for the city while still addressing amenity issues? Because we're only going to be paying for 1 build and not 2. 3, why haven't administration evaluated the proponent's qualitative build on each site separately? Because one bidder may be preferred for the Avenue car park and another preferred for Frame Court. This would increase our qualitative and quantitative outcomes as well as spread the development risk across 2 developers. And lastly, 4, now that we are informed on what 8 proponents have proposed across stage 1 and 2 of this process, is it possible that the desired and optimal build form is a representation of 1 or more bidders' submissions and not solely that of administration's preferred proponent? Unfortunately, council has not discussed any of these alternate options, and administration has not presented any analysis or opinion for us to consider before deciding whether to nominate a preferred candidate. I totally disagree with the thing that the argument is that the decision is not made. As soon as you go down this path, you're actually, if you're not legitimately saying that this is the best alternative on the table, including options that the property developers have not proposed, like the 4 that I've mentioned, then we are wasting time. It's not good governance to take a party down to legals and incur significant costs when, as what you're saying in the council, that the council chamber, that we might just change our minds and cease the process later. I think that's irresponsible. And I think that we should do the due diligence. Now is the time to work out what is the desired option. Is it on the table now? And is it reflected in the preferred proponent's submission? It's for these reasons and some others that I'll talk to later that I wish to flag a motion to amend administration's recommendation to this item in the interest of due diligence, good governance, and to safeguard against potential risk to the city and ratepayers for this and future generations.
You've raised a lot of issues there, Councillor Arpaio, really sort of saying in effect that you don't think that this is good governance. So I think that we probably do need to just get some feedback from administration, potentially from the probity advisor or the consultants in relation to some of those points. So perhaps CEO, we could start with you.
Through Mayor Cole, there are 3 options on the table. It's up to council to determine which one it wants to proceed with. All 3 proposals were shortlisted from the long list, and all 3 performed well against that qualitative criteria. The option we're putting forward to council is the one that is best rated on the qualitative criteria and also the most advantageous to the city in terms of the financial and commercial terms. And that's the one we'd be suggesting that council should approve for us to go to discussions on a draft heads of agreement and a draft business plan. But I might just see if our probity officer wanted to comment on the process and whether or not we could entertain any changes to the process at this stage.
Not sure if Kevin's on.
Is,
line.
are you able to hear me?
Yes, can we just grab your camera as well?
Yes, sure.
Yes, we can see you, Kevin, and I think we can hear you.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Look, I'd just like to comment that having been part of this process now for in excess of probably 8 months, I think this has been a very robust process that has been followed. And up to this stage, the process has largely adhered to the procurement plan that was put in place at the start of the process. When the expressions of interest were first called, the documentation was initially developed, the evaluation plan was prepared, and the initial evaluations have been carried out. We moved from the stage 1 proposals through to the stage 2 clarifications, if you like. After considering a very lengthy submission or development of a set of questions that needed to be addressed for the stage 2 proposals. And that very lengthy list, which I'd have to say is probably the most exhaustive I've seen in any procurement process, was sent to three proponents who were judged to be capable of providing suitable responses to the city. The stage 2 submissions were received and have been evaluated by the evaluation panel under the guidance of our commercial advisors, Signet West. Now, intervening in that process was the appointment of PwC as, I guess they were called the external accountants, I think, initially, but essentially PwC were appointed to review the financial evaluation that took place as part of the stage 2 process. And I think they did a thorough job in that task as far as I can see. But from a probity point of view, the council is obliged to adhere to the procurement process that was agreed at the start of the overall process. That's what the bidders responded to, and that's what they have continued to respond to. Our decision-making has been based around adhering to those guidelines. And where probity issues start to become a real problem is if you move away from the established process that has been agreed, because it starts to raise questions as to why you did it. What pressure was exerted to cause you to go down a different path? And a lot of the more significant cases involving probity matters have arisen because there's been a departure from the agreed way of doing things. Now, most of my work relates to roles with state public sector agencies, some Commonwealth ones, and of course other local government ones. Successful procurement processes are those which adhere to the established procurement plan, and in particular the evaluation plan which is put in place. When you start to move away from that, you start to put your overall process at potentially substantial probity risk. Unfortunately, in my long career of being a probity advisor, I've not been part of a process that has not gone well. I have concerns at the moment that some of the suggestions that are being made potentially or could potentially lead the council away from the agreed probity or the agreed evaluation process that was put in place at the start of this process, and to which the respondents have in good faith adhered to with their submissions and their overall approach to responding to questions and particularly the stage 2 submissions. So that I'd just like to set that scene. And I would also like to point out that I think Councillor Loden made some really good points about the way processes such as this are followed in the private sector. And I wouldn't dispute that at all. But I would have to say that there's some elements of flexibility that the private sector have in the way they manage project evaluations and the decision-making processes that basically don't apply within the public sector. So that would be my introductory set of comments relating to where we've got to.
Can I just have a point of order?
Thank you, Kevin. I'm just saying thank you to Kevin.
Sure.
What is your point
I
of
think
order?
just a point of order. I think my comments have been misinterpreted by yourself and the probity officer. What I'm talking
Sorry, I
about.
haven't made any comments about.
Well,
your
you
comments.
said that about the good governance, but the reference to good governance was not the existing process. The reference to good governance and good governance principles is that we shouldn't go down a path before having the opportunity to say what is the best course of action to go forward. This is the right time to consider whether what's on the table is the optimal from a qualitative and quantitative, but this process doesn't allow for alternates to be considered. So it's just a pause in the process while we can consider that internally before deciding whether to pursue the existing process or to abandon it. So I think it's very important from a reputational perspective that that comment is not misconstrued by the presiding member or the probity officer. Thank you.
I did not attempt to misconstrue your comments. I was just trying to get some general commentary in relation to what you had put forward, because you have proposed a number of different options. And I think the critical question is, does this meet the procurement process and the evaluation process that the city and the council has already agreed to and set in train? This is a decision point that it comes after a long train of decision points. So I think I'd probably just like to seek some advice on some of the proposals put forward in relation to things like taking elements from different proposals to actually have a desired and optimal outcome across different proposals. I don't think that it's possible for the council to do that. I think this was discussed at our meeting on Friday morning. Would anyone like to comment on that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. I think the point that I'd like to just make is council in December 2021 at the council meeting adopted a process that administration has been following. There was a lot of debate at that meeting, and there were different views, but ultimately council adopted a process for the city to follow, which is this RFP process that we are now at the point of essentially making a recommendation or appointing a preferred proponent and recommending to council to do that. If we started to discuss different options, I think that's open to council to do, but we could not start to introduce, as Kevin has highlighted, extra considerations or steps in the process before appointing a preferred proponent through this process. So all that council could do is determine to abandon the process and go through a different process after these discussions that have been mentioned at the workshopping discussions. It wouldn't be an option to introduce additional requirements or considerations to inform the decision-making around this process. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So there is an option there. It's just, it would either be to continue with the process without any additional considerations, or to abandon the process and come up with another process completely. And there are obviously risks associated with that.
Can I just have another point of order? Because I don't want my comments to be misconstrued. So to determine whether to abandon the process, you need an internal discussion about whether the right option is in front of us, and will this process take us to the optimal qualitative and quantitative position for the city. You have to have that discussion to be able to make that determination as to whether the process will lead us down that path. That's my point. Okay, so I'm not trying to change the process. I'm not inferring that we would go back to the proponents, the short list of proponents, and say, can you change this materially or not? I understand that we can't do that. What I'm saying is, what I was saying in my substantive debate was that this would be the right time and the appropriate time to determine whether what's in front of it is something that we'd wish to really entertain, subject to heads of agreement. But to do that, we also need to consider what the other options that aren't on the table, and then that will inform us as to whether we should nominate this person or party and go forward. So I want to be clear on that, because I don't want any inference that I am what I'm suggesting is a breach of the existing process or of existing governance.
I'm sorry, I really don't know where to proceed from here. Shall we continue with the debate? Would anyone like to debate this item publicly who hasn't already? Or ask questions that don't go to confidential material?
I ask if I don't want to ask any questions because the question that I could ask would require us to go to behind closed doors, but I don't want to ask it until I know whether that would be superfluous to ask them if my amendment got through. So can I reserve the right to ask questions in the confidential behind closed doors if and only if this amendment doesn't get through?
I guess so. I mean, ordinarily, if you have questions, you ask questions, but if it's incumbent upon council receiving your amendment, then that's something that you make a decision on. I'm just wondering whether at this point, you're flagging, so do you wish to move this amendment and you wish to then ask confidential questions?
Sorry, Mayor, if it's permissible, if the amendment doesn't get up, then I might have some additional questions, because then we're going to proceed down the existing path.
Okay. Now, well, I think we need to, if we're going to put. Okay, so, but the thing is, I assume that when what I'm being told by administration is that the amendment itself, the text that you wish for council to adopt as part of the motion, is not confidential, but the reasons are. But let's be frank, in debating the motion, I'm assuming that you wish to outline your confidential reasons to support the amendment. But the reasons that you've outlined have been deemed to be confidential and refer to confidential matters. So you would have to be very careful about what you said. So if there's risk that you're going to go to confidential information, then it's better to debate this behind closed doors.
Clarify, is it all, like every one of my 12 points you're saying is confidential because they're giving too much information? Or is there a particular point?
Through Mayor Cole, I'm just looking at the Executive Director as well. I'd probably read the draft amendment, which was circulated today, and it's quite long, essentially asking to defer the decision put to council tonight in the current report to get some more of this information that's requested. So I'm just wondering whether through the Executive Director, whether it's actually a procedural deferral motion, and what you're asking to defer for is this additional information that's been asked for in the amendment. That's one way it could be interpreted.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I mean, I think in relation to 2.1 of the amendment, that is clearly an amendment. The remainder of it perhaps could be interpreted as a deferral, but 2.1 is certainly an amendment.
So we're treating it as an amendment. The reasons contain confidential material. Perhaps we could just start by saying whether there is anyone that wishes to second this amendment, because if there isn't a seconder, then the amendment would lapse in any case. And that would then inform where we go to from here. So Councillor Oppolo, I assume that you wish to move this amendment?
Yes,
Is there-
please.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? It's seconded by Councillor Alexander. So therefore, I do think that we need to go behind closed doors, given that the reasons supporting the amendment contain confidential material related to the confidential attachment. So we do need a procedural motion to go behind closed doors. Can I please have a mover and seconder for that motion? Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Castle. All those in favour? Councillor Oppolo, can you please vote on your procedural motion, on the procedural motion to go behind closed doors? Well, you don't have to if you don't agree with it. It's your vote. I just need you to indicate. Okay, we're going behind closed doors, unanimously supported.